Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kouri Richins. Eric Richins was born on May 13, 1982, and had a profound impact on the lives of those around him. Throughout his childhood and teenage years, Eric was fiercely passionate about sports, excelling in basketball, baseball, and soccer, which reflected his dedication to staying active. His true love, however, was anything that took him outdoors, particularly hunting, where his exceptional marksmanship and keen eye earned him numerous trophies from around the world. Eric was renowned for his dynamic personality, which radiated joy and laughter wherever he went. He possessed a natural talent for telling stories, playing harmless pranks on friends, and contagious laughter that would light up the room. Eric was undoubtedly the life of every party, leaving a lasting impression on everyone he met. Eric, a Utah resident, possessed an extensive collection of motorized vehicles, including trucks, four-wheelers, and snowmobiles, which he used to explore the outdoors and satisfy his thirst for adventure. Although he loved having fun, Eric was deeply committed to his faith and was an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. With the encouragement of his family, he volunteered for a 2-year mission trip to Mexico City, where he honed his Spanish language skills. Upon completing high school, Eric pursued higher education at the University of Utah, graduating in 2009 with a bachelor's degree in international studies and a minor in Spanish. Eric met Kouri Darden at Home Depot, where she was an employee. As a regular customer due to his construction work, Eric developed a friendly connection with Kouri over time. He was attracted to her charm and beauty, but was too shy to approach her directly. So Eric asked a friend to help him get her contact information. One day, while Eric's friend was shopping at Home Depot, he casually asked Kouri for her phone number, mentioning Eric's interest in getting to know her better. Appreciative of his friend's help, Eric anxiously waited to hear back. It was now up to Eric to make the next move, and he finally summoned the courage to call Kouri, arranging their first in-person meeting. Unbeknownst to him, this meeting would alter his life forever. From the moment Eric and Kouri met, they clicked. Their connection was undeniable, and their first date marked the start of a romantic journey. As they introduced each other to their families, their bond grew stronger. Kouri's mother and brothers instantly took to Eric, while Eric's family was equally impressed by Kouri's kind nature and how well she fitted in with him. Although Eric's sisters, Katie and Amy, were initially cautious, they soon warmed up to Kouri and made her feel part of their family. Eric and Kouri tied the knot in 2013 with a private wedding ceremony. 2 years later, Kouri gave birth to their first child, Carter, and later Ashton, and finally Weston, completing their family of 5. Eric proved to be a natural at fatherhood, and his sons looked up to him with admiration. He was exceedingly proud of his boys, celebrating their every achievement, whether it was academic, in sports, or in the arts, and was always present to cheer them on and congratulate them on their accomplishments. Eric eventually launched a stonemasonry business which proved extremely successful. His exceptional craftsmanship and meticulous attention to detail set him apart, attracting clients seeking his expertise in crafting stunning stonework. The thriving business brought financial security to Eric and his family. Meanwhile, Kouri's real estate ventures also generated a significant income. Her entrepreneurial drive and in-depth knowledge of the local market made her a vital contributor to their family's growing prosperity. She would buy homes, renovate them, and sell them at a profit. As a result, the Richins family built considerable wealth, and their lifestyle embodied the pinnacle of success. On the surface, the Richins family seemed to have a perfect life. However, this illusion of perfection shattered on March 4, 2022, when Kouri made a frantic emergency call to report that her husband Eric was not responding. When paramedics arrived, they discovered that Eric had sadly died. Kouri was devastated by the news and called her mom, Lisa, who rushed over. Her brothers DJ and Ronnie joined them, struggling to process Eric's sudden death. They'd celebrated Kouri's business success at their new mansion earlier, with Kouri making Eric a Moscow Mule before bed. She'd slept with her son due to his nightmares, and when she returned to their room at 3 a.m., found Eric cold and unresponsive. As Kouri waited for the paramedics to arrive, she remembered the dispatcher's instructions to perform CPR on Eric, which she claimed to have followed. While the paramedics were unable to determine the exact cause of Eric's death, they suspected it might have been an aneurysm, given that Eric was a healthy 39-year-old with no known medical conditions. However, it emerged later that Eric had confided in Kouri about chest pains the night before his death, which lent further support to the aneurysm theory. But the autopsy results were to reveal a shocking truth. Eric's death was caused by a lethal dose of fentanyl, a powerful and dangerous pain medication that can be fatal in excessive amounts. This discovery raised a critical question for the investigators. How did Eric ingest this substance? Eric's family blamed his recreational drug use for the fentanyl in his system after he died. Kouri said Eric took THC gummies nightly to relax, but they worried about their source, suspecting he bought them illegally. Despite this, Eric's family firmly rejected the allegations, convinced that there was more to the story, and urged investigators to explore alternative explanations. Meanwhile, Kouri attempted to move forward with her life, but her brother Ronnie disclosed that she was facing immense challenges. The loss of her husband and their father had created a void in their lives, and their 3 sons were acting out in response to the uncertainty surrounding his death. Detectives suspected foul play in Eric's death. After Kouri appeared on Utah News to promote her book on grief, she was arrested May 8, 2023, accused of murdering her husband. The community was stunned, trying to make sense of the sudden, tragic turn of events. Kouri has been accused of homicide by poisoning. Eric's family claims that Kouri deliberately added a lethal dose of fentanyl to the Moscow Mule she prepared for him on the night he died. However, Kouri's lawyer argues that no fentanyl was found on the glassware at their home. Kouri denies any involvement in Eric's death, stating that she had no motive to harm him. Kouri's mother, Lisa, was shocked and disbelieving when she heard about her daughter's alleged role in Eric's death. She told investigators that the couple seemed happy and there was no reason for Kouri to kill him. However, the investigation revealed that the relationship between Kouri and Eric was not as perfect as it seemed. The couple had issues, and Kouri, a stay-at-home mom for several years, longed for independence. Furthermore, Kouri was growing increasingly frustrated with Eric's frequent hunting trips. Lisa revealed that Eric had been unfaithful in the marriage, and the couple had confided in her about the affair. Eric and Kouri sought counseling to address their problems, but Eric's family denies that he ever cheated on Kouri. According to them, the couple's decision to seek counseling was driven by Eric's love for his sons and his desire to save the marriage. Eric had started thinking about what would happen if he got a divorce, despite trying to save his marriage. To protect his assets, he took some precautions. Without telling anyone what he was doing, he set up a secret trust with his sister Katie. During the investigation, it was found that there were 6 life insurance policies on Eric, worth a total of $3 million. 2 months before Eric died, Kouri had forged his signature on another policy worth $100,000. It was also discovered that Kouri had allegedly taken money from Eric's personal accounts and misused funds from his business over several years. A spokesperson for Eric's family claimed that Kouri's house-flipping business was in trouble, despite her claims that it was doing well. In fact, it was millions of dollars in debt. The spokesperson alleged that Kouri urgently needed money, and that, according to a premarital agreement they had signed, she would only inherit Eric's business assets if he died before her, while they were still married. Kouri's attorney rejected the allegations, clarifying that her business was not in debt. They pointed out that temporarily taking on debt through lines of credit was a standard practice in the house-flipping business, and that once the properties were sold, the debt would be settled. The attorney stressed that the large figure cited by the spokesperson simply represented the volume of business transactions involved. Lisa, Kouri's mom, said Eric backed Kouri's business ventures, including buying the Heber Valley mansion where they partied the night he died. Kouri bought the 2017-built abandoned mansion with investor help, planning to develop it into a recreational spot and sell for a profit, potentially earning $12 million, a huge jump from the $3 million purchase price. Eric's family says he opposed buying a mansion, contradicting reports. They claim he argued with his wife about it, and that Kouri gave him a fentanyl-laced drink on the night he died. They also accuse Kouri of previously trying to harm Eric on a Greece trip. However, Kouri's brother Ronnie denies these claims, saying Eric's illness was due to taking antibiotics and being mistakenly served liquor. Eric's family claims Kouri tried to kill him twice, including on Valentine's Day 2022, when he had a severe allergic reaction after eating a sandwich she brought him. They also questioned her behavior after his death, including an incident where she punched his sister in the face and neck while trying to access a safe containing $125,000 to $165,000 in cash. Kouri had a 4-hour bail hearing, handcuffed beside her attorney, trying to convince the judge to release her on bail. Prosecutors presented 3 witnesses and evidence, claiming she poisoned her husband. A cell phone expert testified about Kouri's Google searches, including how to retrieve deleted iPhone texts and a lethal fentanyl dose. Her attorney countered that these searches happened after her husband's death, as Kouri sought answers to her own accusations. Prosecutors questioned the lead detective about Kouri's sources for the drugs used to kill Eric. A woman named Carmen Laber, who worked for Kouri, told investigators about a meeting where Kouri asked her to buy fentanyl for an investor with a back injury. Carmen, with a criminal history, agreed and bought 15 to 30 pills, exchanging them for cash on February 11, 2022, days before Eric's poisoning attempt. During the investigation, Carmen revealed that Kouri got in touch with her again, saying he wanted stronger drugs. She said Kouri paid for the pills with a check about a week after Eric died. However, Kouri's lawyer disputed this, suggesting the check might have been payment for cleaning work instead. The lawyer also tried to raise doubts about Carmen's trustworthiness by pointing out that she was a convicted felon on probation. At the bail hearing, Eric's sister spoke to the judge about the family's intense emotional pain after Eric's death and their fear that if Kouri were released on bail, they would suffer even more. The judge decided to keep Kouri in custody. In 2023, Kouri had a serious medical crisis in jail after taking prescribed medication, which caused her to have a seizure and required hospitalization. While searching her cell, jail officials found a handwritten letter that prosecutors claimed provided additional evidence of Kouri's plans and motivations. Prosecutors requested a no-contact order, citing the letter as proof of Kouri's attempt to intimidate witnesses. Prosecutors claim Kouri wrote her mom, instructing her brother Ronnie on how to testify in court, saying Eric got drugs in Mexico. The letter stated Ronnie should say Eric admitted to buying pain pills in Tijuana and to obtain texts about Eric's drug use. Kouri adamantly denied the letter was witness tampering, stating that the letter was nothing but a fictional creation she wrote as a fantasy story. The judge denied the motion for no contact, stating that the state failed to prove witness tampering. Kouri's family seeks custody of their 3 sons, currently living with Eric's relative. The boys have regular video calls with Kouri in jail, and her family attends their public sports events. Kouri faces 25 years to life if convicted of murdering her husband Eric with fentanyl. His family has filed civil cases, believing she's after his money. The trial starts in 2025. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Susan Reinert. Susan Gallagher Reinert was born in 1943 in the charming town of Ridgeway, located in northwestern Pennsylvania. Her parents were William and Jane Gallagher, with her father working as a newspaper business manager and her mother being a dedicated school teacher. These early influences played a significant role in shaping Susan's path. From a young age, it was evident that she was destined to follow in her mother's footsteps, displaying a passion for learning and an innate love for literature. Her educational journey commenced at Grove City College, where she crossed paths with a young Air Force man named Kenneth Reinhard. This chance encounter would go on to change the trajectory of her life. Susan and Kenneth fell in love during their undergraduate studies. Susan's hard work and commitment paid off when she graduated with a bachelor's degree. But she didn't stop there. She went on to earn a master's degree in English from Pennsylvania State University in 1966. In 1965, shortly after graduating from Grove City College, Susan and Kenneth got married and started a new chapter of their lives. As a military couple, they were stationed in various places across the country, first moving to the West Coast and living in Sacramento, California, before returning to the Northeast and settling in Rome, New York. They even spent some time in Puerto Rico before eventually finding their permanent home in the Philadelphia region in 1971. In 1974, Susan Reinhard, a dedicated teacher and loving mother, faced an unexpected twist in her life when she and Kenneth decided to separate. Despite the divorce, it was a peaceful parting, closing a chapter in their lives without legal disputes. Susan, a vibrant single mother, focused on creating a warm home for her two kids, Karen and Michael. Known for her warm and friendly nature, Susan was beloved by colleagues and students at Chestnut Walled Elementary School. Outside of her professional life, Susan dedicated time to Parents Without Partners. Following her mother's death, Susan, emotionally weighed down, found strength in her connection with the organization. Despite the challenges, she remained resilient, leaning on Parents Without Partners for support as she navigated loss and change. Her story took a mysterious turn in the months leading up to her disappearance. Her mother's death and a substantial inheritance added complexity to her life, yet Susan's strength and resilience, along with her support network, hinted at a resilient spirit facing the unknown. On Friday, June 22, 1979, Susan Reinhart and her two children embarked on what would be their last day together. Earlier that day, Michael, Susan's son, spent time with his father, Kenneth, who worked as a senior personnel officer for Fidelity Bank in the neighboring suburb near Philadelphia. That evening, they shared a special moment by participating in a father-son softball game. However, the game was cut short when Susan arrived to pick up Michael at approximately 8:30 p.m. Michael made a call to Kenneth at home, apologizing for their early departure from the game. Later that evening, Susan reached out to her former in-laws, Florence and John Reinhard, with whom she maintained a warm relationship even after her divorce. With close to a full tank, Susan ensured she had enough fuel for the trip to Allentown, Pennsylvania, a town located about an hour north. Her plan was to attend a Parents Without Partners conference and use it as a weekend getaway for her and the kids. Susan had signed up to moderate a workshop and registered her two children for events that weekend. They intended to leave on Saturday morning and return later in the weekend. That Friday evening, around 9 p.m., 11-year-old Karen and 10-year-old Michael were outside collecting hailstones left behind by a summer storm. Approximately half an hour later, neighbors heard the distinct sound of Susan's orange-red Plymouth Horizon starting up. A few minutes later, the hatchback was no longer in Susan's driveway. Susan had left home with her two children, presumably heading to visit her boyfriend that evening before heading to the conference. Susan had a long-standing affair with William Bradfield, also a teacher, and despite the secrecy, it strained her marriage with Kenneth. Rumors spread that Susan and William might marry. On June 22, 1979, Susan set off on a trip with her children after visiting her boyfriend. Their planned destination was Allentown, approximately 49 miles to the north, where they intended to spend the night in a motel. However, the expected trip never took place. Instead, Susan and her two children vanished without a trace. 2 days passed without any sign of Susan Reinhart and her two children. The days of uncertainty and worry were taking their toll on those who knew and loved them. Then on June 25, 1979, the orange Plymouth hatchback that Susan had been driving was discovered in the parking lot of the Houston Hotel in Harrisburg. This was 87 miles from Allentown and 97 miles from her home. Tragically, Susan Reinhardt's lifeless body was discovered in the back of her vehicle. The details of her tragic demise were gruesome. Her nude, battered body was bound in chains and curled up in the wheel well of her car. Her hands were bound, and she had 2 black eyes. It was evident that she had either been beaten with chains or bound so tightly that the chains had left bruises on her back. Even more horrifying, she had been administered a lethal dose of morphine. However, the whereabouts of her 2 children remained unknown, as they had seemingly vanished without a trace. The police searched for hours, hoping the children were with a babysitter. However, none of Susan's regular sitters, friends, or family had seen them that weekend. So, the police began looking for answers. First, the police plastered pictures of the Reinhardt family across newspapers for weeks, hoping to find any leads on the 2 missing children. This was before the internet and Amber Alerts were available. As the investigation continued, it was revealed that Susan Reinhardt had named William Bradfield, the man she believed she would marry, as the beneficiary of life insurance policies worth a substantial $730,000. This raised suspicions that the children might have been killed to clear the way for this financial windfall. However, William Bradfield had a solid alibi, as he was at the beach in Cape May, New Jersey, during the weekend when Susan was killed and her children disappeared. Several other teachers were with him and could vouch for his whereabouts. The police shifted their focus to Upper Marin High School, where Susan worked. The school was already dealing with its share of turmoil. The principal, Jay, was involved in a scandal. He had been the principal until the previous year, when he was relieved of his post. Jay was fired after he was arrested at a local shopping center, where a search of his Ford Granada revealed loaded handguns, a hooded mask, and various tools associated with burglary. Equally unsettling, a syringe filled with morphine was found in his trunk. Even before this, Jay's life was falling apart. His wife, Stephanie, was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, and she would ultimately succumb to it in August of 1979. The following years saw her in and out of hospitals during this time. She began keeping a diary, in which she made note of her husband's bizarre behavior, which began to truly escalate during this period. He began to participate in group intimacy and swinging groups, which she herself was not too keen on, and this seemed to precede even more alarming behavior. In September of 1977, the couple's adult daughter, also named Stephanie, decided to return home to live with her parents. Stephanie brought her husband, Edward Hunsberger, with her, and the 2 moved into the Jays' home in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Stephanie was in the middle of a battle with cancer, so the family was in the midst of uncertainty, and it seemed like tensions were between all of them. Edward and Stephanie Hunsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law respectively, were no saints. Both had been battling heroin addiction for some time and had struggled to find and keep employment in the years preceding their move. Then, moving back home with Stephanie's parents was an act of desperation and a way for them to stay away from drugs. In the early months of 1978, just a few months after moving in with Jay Smith and his ailing wife, their daughter Stephanie and son-in-law Edward mysteriously went missing. The last known sighting of Stephanie and Edward was in February 1978, when they visited Edward's parents in North Wales, Pennsylvania. Upon leaving, they mentioned they would return for another visit soon, but they never showed up again. Edward also failed to meet with his probation officer as scheduled. Later that month, authorities would begin to reach out to their last known contact, Jay Smith, who would tell anyone interested in hearing his side of the story that Edward and Stephanie had left for California. According to him, the 2 had owed money to some drug dealers in the region and had fled to the West Coast, but he couldn't provide any more information than that. Edward and Stephanie had been living as nomads, so no one noticed their disappearance. Meanwhile, Jay was arrested for theft, and a search of his house revealed alarming findings alongside firearms. Authorities found marijuana, prescription pills, security guard uniforms, badges, and disturbing pornography. They also discovered nitric acid and stolen office equipment from a local school. Jay was connected to recent armed robberies matching his description and attire. While awaiting sentencing for theft, Jay's alibi witness, William, testified that they were on vacation during the robberies. However, the jury didn't buy it. Jay had an unsettling reputation at Upper Marin, earning the nickname the Prince of Darkness. Susan's autopsy indicated death from strangulation or suffocation, with a wide time frame for her demise. Investigators questioned Jay about his whereabouts during that period, but he couldn't provide a coherent answer. An official stated that there was enough morphine in her system to kill her 10 times over, strongly indicating an intentional overdose. Jay was eventually found guilty of a series of store robberies that occurred during the late 1970s, and on June 25, 1979, he was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison, just as the investigation was intensifying. But that wasn't all. Even though Jay was imprisoned for his burglary charges, the police still saw him as the main suspect and began investigating his background further. Only then did they discover that Jay's daughter and husband had gone missing in a similar manner as Susan and her 2 children. The police suspected that there could be connections between the disappearance of the couple, Susan's death, and the disappearance of her children. Firstly, Susan was killed by a morphine overdose, and a large quantity of morphine was found in Jay's house a few months earlier. Secondly, a plastic comb with Jay's military unit insignia was discovered in Susan's car. The disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law bore a striking resemblance to the disappearance of Susan's children. The events that took place during this crime were truly shocking and left a lasting impact on the public, but the real shocker was yet to come. In the last weeks of July 1979, approximately a month after the discovery of Susan's body near Harrisburg, investigators stumbled upon a potential motive for this tragic crime: financial gain. On July 20, 1979, a lawyer from Philadelphia filed a caveat in both Montgomery and Delaware counties on behalf of Susan's ex-husband, Kenneth Reinhard, and her brother, Patrick Reinert. This legal maneuver was intended to temporarily halt the processing of any will that Susan might have left behind in either county. The purpose was to allow these 2 parties, Susan's ex-husband and her brother, the opportunity to review the will. They chose to file this in both counties because Susan's residence in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, was situated near the county border, making it feasible for her to have filed a will in either location. The following week, it was revealed that just a few weeks before her tragic death, Susan had made significant changes to her will. She'd also acquired several expensive life insurance policies, designating her boyfriend at the time as the beneficiary. In her legal documents, she referred to him as her future husband. As the police delved deeper into the case, they learned that Susan's death occurred sometime between midnight on Saturday, June 23, 1979, and midnight on Sunday, June 24th. William and the other teachers arrived in Cape Cod at 5 a.m. on Saturday, where they stayed until the afternoon of Monday, June 25th. However, William's exact whereabouts during the time of Susan's disappearance remained unclear, suggesting a potential gap in his alibi. It also revealed that Susan had been withdrawing substantial sums of cash from her accounts, totaling approximately $25,000, which she did through several deposits due to daily withdrawal limits. She informed bank employees that she intended to invest the funds in multiple high-yielding investments managed by her boyfriend, William Bradfield, whom she referred to as her future husband. What Susan didn't know was that she was just one of several women in William's life. He was dating multiple people, including one of their fellow English teachers, with whom he had maintained a secret relationship for nearly a decade. Allegedly, William had promised to handle these financial transactions and assured her that the investments would yield substantial returns to fund their upcoming marriage and relocation to England. When investigators looked into the case, they discovered fake stocks and bonds inside Susan's home, which initially puzzled them. However, it later became clear that William had given these fraudulent securities to Susan, having forged and sold them to her. These bogus securities were linked to mostly non-existent companies and held little value, pointing to a long-running deception by Susan's lover. This revelation added a new dimension to the story, intensifying the existing financial motive. In March 1980, William was called to testify in a civil suit, but during his initial appearance, he refused to answer questions, deferring inquiries to his legal counsel. His lawyers, on the other hand, denied that he had taken Susan's money, but were open to negotiating a settlement with the state to resolve the matter and process Susan's will, which stood to be $7 million. In June of 1980, William testified for the first time as part of the civil trial. He downplayed almost every connection he had to the case. William claimed his relationship with Susan was not as serious as she had told her friends and family. He also testified that he and Susan had not been planning to get married later that year, despite Susan telling numerous confidants otherwise. Furthermore, William implied that Susan had engaged in a secret affair with Jay Smith, the former principal of Upper Marion High School, but this was not supported by any evidence. Many friends and family members recalled Susan being in a long-term relationship with William, but they did not mention a relationship with Jay Smith, who was in the state prison during the trial. William refused to explain why Susan had named him the beneficiary of an estate worth more than $1 million. He portrayed Susan as an unreliable person, always in trouble, and blamed her for her own problems, stating he was just helping to clean up her messes. As the civil suit into the missing $25,000 progressed, Susan's brother and ex-husband filed a separate lawsuit in June 1980, aiming to recover the full amount of an insurance policy taken out on Susan's life just weeks before her death, around $450,000, and move the funds into a trust for a private investigation. The case took several unexpected turns, and the twists kept coming. On February 20th, 1981, police arrested William on 2 counts of theft and 1 count of conspiracy, alleging that he had kept the $25,000 Susan had given him, ostensibly for investment. A former student of William's, Wendy Ziegler, was also charged as a co-conspirator. William was released on bail on February 23, 1981, but the criminal trial was set for the following month. Before the criminal trial began, the original civil suit came to a resolution. It was announced that $36,000 would be allocated from Susan's estate to pay for further investigations into the whereabouts of the children and contest the rest of Susan's will, preventing William from receiving any funds. On August 3, 1981, William's 5-day trial ended with a guilty verdict for theft. Delaware County Prosecutor Edward Weiss requested an increase in Williams' bond from $25,000 to $75,000, as they believed the conviction increased the flight risk, particularly given the looming possibility of murder charges. This request was granted by Judge Robert A. Wright. On April 6, 1983, William was taken into custody by Pennsylvania state troopers and charged with 3 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and obstructing the administration of the law. The grand jury's findings pointed to William's awareness of the plot to kill Susan and her children and his alleged complicity in these crimes. However, J.J., who was believed to be involved, wasn't charged at that time. The indictment relied partially on a confession from an inmate named Proctor Noel, who claimed that William had confessed to his involvement in the murders during a chess match in prison. The arrest of William Bradfield in April 1983 marked a turning point in the case. While there was no direct evidence linking William to the murder of Susan Reinhardt or the disappearance of her 2 children, prosecutors were confident in their case. William's prior theft conviction added context, and the connection to persons unknown, believed to be responsible for disposing of the bodies, further implicated him. In the 1980s, Jay Smith, who was serving time for unrelated convictions, was unable to avoid testifying before a grand jury, despite asserting his Fifth Amendment right. William Bradfield was called to testify in 1984, but the details of his testimony remained undisclosed. This round of questioning was believed to be related to Jay Smith's missing daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie and Edward Hunsberger. In April 1985, Jay was asked to provide handwriting samples, likely related to documents written years before that may have detailed a plan to murder Susan Reinhart. This eventually led to Jay's arrest on June 25, 1985, exactly 6 years after Susan Reinhart's body was found. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and taken into custody while awaiting trial. Joseph Wall, a noted crime author, released a book about the case in 1984, favoring the theory that JJ was the actual killer. A TV miniseries adaptation followed, further exposing the case to a national audience. JJ continued to maintain his innocence from prison, attempting appeals and alleging that he'd been framed by William Bradfield. It wasn't until 1989 that the court decided to revisit his case and discovered issues with the prosecution, leading to a new trial in 1990. Jay waived his right to a speedy trial to allow for a full investigation. By 1992, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in Jay's favor, vacating his murder conviction and finding issues with the prosecution's conduct. Over the next 2 decades, the state did not retry the case, allowing JSJ to live the rest of his life as a free man. William Bradfield continued to evade court rulings, refusing to repay the $25,000 he owed to Susan Reinhart's estate. The lawsuit was finally settled in 1996. Jay filed lawsuits against the state and Joseph Wall, alleging defamation and conspiracy, but both lawsuits were ultimately dismissed. On January 16, 1998, William Bradfield, who had been incarcerated for over a decade, was found unresponsive in his cell and pronounced dead of cardiac arrest. Kenneth Reinhard, Susan Reiner's ex-husband, passed away in June 2002 without knowing the fate of his 2 missing children. JJ, whose sentence was vacated in 1992, went on to write books about the case and remarried in 2002. He died on May 12, 2009, with his involvement in the story and the 1978 disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie and Edward Hunsberger, still unresolved. To this day, these cases remain unsolved. The Reinhart murders is a story that continues to shock people with its many twists and disturbing revelations. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. When an obsession transforms a quiet individual into a monster, it parallels many grave addictions akin to severe illnesses with psychological, biological, or social roots. This case involves a destructive habit. Whether it's an urge for alcohol, prohibited substances, gambling, or an obsessive need for a particular activity or interaction with a certain person or group, it's tragic. Addiction affects not just the individual, but also their loved ones who genuinely strive to help. The once prosperous and happy Amato family faced such a dilemma head-on. As all family members were healthcare professionals, they believed they could manage the situation without external assistance. However, by the time they recognized the severity of the issue, it was regrettably too late. This isn't merely a story of addiction, but of a young man's extreme obsession with a woman he had never met in person. Compounded by his addiction to forbidden substances and a pathological inclination towards theft, the situation spiraled into a horrifying outcome. Let's delve into this case to understand if there was any chance to alter the course of events and prevent the tragedy. Bloodshed at the family home occurred on January 25, 2019. A concerned man contacted the Soule County Police in Florida. He reported that his close friend and colleague, Cody Amato, a nurse, unexpectedly didn't show up for his shift at the hospital, which was highly unusual for him. The day before, Cody had left work about 15 minutes early due to some urgent family issues at home. He departed so hastily he even forgot to collect his pay for the day. Attempts to reach the 31-year-old Cody by phone were unsuccessful. He simply wasn't answering. His girlfriend stated that Kouri went to his parents' house the previous day at his father's request, but never returned to her place. She too couldn't reach him. All these signs triggered alarming thoughts and prompted the dispatch of police officers to the provided address. The Amato family home, located in a suburb of Orlando, featured a large adjoining area with a stable and a horse walking area. Kouri's car was parked in the driveway. Lights were on in several rooms of the house. Everything seemed ordinary at first glance. Doors and windows were intact. When the sheriff's deputy knocked, there was no response. Calls to the landline also went unanswered. The police then sought permission to enter. Upon approval, they cautiously unlocked the back door using a knife to slide the bolt. Inside, an eerie silence pervaded, although the lit rooms suggested someone must be present. Indeed, the homeowners were there. The officers first discovered the lifeless body of 59-year-old Chad Amato, lying on the kitchen floor in a pool of his own blood, with 2 close-range gunshot wounds to his chest. Next, at the staircase opposite the main entrance, they found Kouri curled up and also deceased in a massive pool of blood. Lastly, 61-year-old Margaret Amato was found sitting at her computer in the home office. At first glance, she seemed to be napping with her head resting on her arm. However, blood splatters on the monitor and a large spreading stain beneath her head. The murder weapon, an IWE Jericho 941 pistol, was found next to Kouri's body and later determined by forensic experts to have his fingerprints on it. There were no signs of break-in or external presence, and nothing appeared missing from the house. Initially, it seemed like Kouri might have ended their lives after a family dispute before shooting himself in the chest. However, smeared blood on the front door suggested it was locked by someone leaving after the incident, indicating that the perpetrator wasn't among the deceased family members. Regarding a suspect, those familiar with or connected to the Amato family had little doubt. They pointed to their youngest son, 30-year-old Grant Amato. Grant had been missing since that evening. His car, a white Honda, along with some personal items such as a laptop from his room, were gone, implying that he had taken them with him. Grant was identified as a suspect, prompting a search to locate his whereabouts. Here's what we know about the Amato family. Margaret Amato, née Wade, married Chad Robert Amato in the mid-1990s. Margaret, 2 years older than Chad, was raising a 3-year-old son, Jason, from a marriage. Chad wasn't dissuaded by the fact she had a child. Instead, he embraced Jason as his own. In 1988, they welcomed their first child together, Kouri. Their youngest son, Grant Tyan Amato, was born on May 20, 1989. From childhood, the brothers shared a close bond. Raised in an affluent family environment, they rarely faced adversity. However, to enjoy certain privileges, they had to follow family rules, excel academically, help with chores, and demonstrate good behavior. Their parents held advanced degrees in healthcare. Margaret was a senior operational manager at a reputable private clinic, while Chad initially worked as a clinical pharmacist before transitioning to software specialization. The family's financial status allowed them to live comfortably in a spacious suburban home and indulge in breeding thoroughbred racehorses as a hobby. Jason left home at 18 after finishing high school to attend university and build his own life. He got married and settled down with his family in another state, but maintained close ties with his parents and younger brothers. Kouri and Grant were nearly inseparable, attending the same school and joining the same sports teams. They also regularly visited the shooting range on weekends with their father. The Amatos had an impressive firearm collection, featuring rare pieces available only to Chad for safety reasons. Grant was the youngest of the 3 sons, and naturally received much attention and care from everyone due to his frail and sickly nature as a child. This made him grow up shy and modest, finding it challenging to connect with peers outside of his brothers. Grant became particularly close to Kouri after Jason grew up and left home following high school graduation. Eventually, both brothers pursued medical degrees and became anesthesiologists. Kouri excelled in his studies, becoming the top student in his class. Both managed to land jobs in their field at a hospital. Kouri a reputation as a reliable professional, but Grant frequently got into trouble and made errors, often needing his work double-checked. In the summer of 2018, Grant's career at the hospital ended scandalously. He was caught stealing strictly controlled sedatives, which caused euphoria and hallucinations, and were used rarely for anesthesia. The discovery led to police involvement, and Grant was arrested. During interrogation, he admitted to the theft, claiming he administered the drugs to patients who, in his opinion, were under-medicated. Many believed Grant was using or selling the drugs illegally, though there was no direct evidence of this. He was immediately suspended and later fired. His criminal case for theft was eventually dismissed, reportedly due to his parents' intervention. Unemployed and dependent on the internet after losing his job, the 29-year-old man, already a loner, became even more withdrawn. He spent weeks indoors, glued to his computer, mostly browsing adult websites. Grant never had a girlfriend and struggled with social interactions with women, leaving him feeling inadequate. He indulged in viewing adult content and frequently interacted with webcam models on specialized platforms, trying to fill the void of a non-existent personal life. This private interaction naturally came at a cost. Grant easily accessed funds from his parents' and older brother's accounts for these activities. This obsession quickly spiraled into an addiction compounded by regular alcohol consumption. Yet Grant seemed content with this lifestyle, living off his family and spending their money without contributing anything in return. Eventually, his father issued an ultimatum: find a job soon, or he would have to leave home and lose any financial support from the family. Grant promised his father to resolve the issue but had no real intention of seeking employment. He claimed he would become a streamer, earning by broadcasting video games. Grant's parents, considering it better than nothing, agreed to set up a streaming station for him. In reality, he was locked in his room indulging in his favorite pastime, visiting adult-only websites. In August 2018, Kouri took a vacation from work and decided to embark on a journey across the globe for a change of. He dreamed of visiting Japan and invited his younger brother Grant and his best friend Jeremy. While Kouri and Jeremy funded their trip independently, Grant's vacation was financed by their parents. However, instead of giving the money directly to Grant, they entrusted it to Kouri, who was seen as the more responsible of the two. The trip lasted nearly 2 weeks. Throughout it, Grant seemed disengaged and showed little interest in tours or landmarks. He was constantly fixated on his smartphone screen and often stayed back at the hotel using his brother's laptop. One day when the group went to Lake Kawaguchi near Mount Fuji, Jeremy accidentally left his credit card in their hotel room. Seizing the opportunity, Grant hacked into Jeremy's account and withdrew thousands of dollars. He spent it all on private sessions with his favorite webcam model. Jeremy discovered the theft later, but initially suspected fraud. He couldn't pinpoint the culprit and continued investigating after returning home, unaware that Grant was responsible. About the identity of the mysterious webcam model, who became an obsession for Grant. On a site where he paid for private online interactions with various women, he met Sylvia Venizlavova from Bulgaria, known as Silly. She captivated him with her striking looks and confidence. Sylvia's charisma and passion made Grant feel special, loved, desired, and unique. He really thought her feelings for him were genuine. He believed they could have a real relationship. Grant was sure they were together and needed to win over this fiery brunette from all her admirers. He spent hours and thousands of dollars daily to ensure she had no time for other men. Grant also showered her with gifts like expensive lingerie and jewelry, which she wore during their video chats. Desperate to impress Sylvia, Grant constantly fabricated stories and lost touch with reality. He claimed he lived alone in a large house, owned a successful business, and could afford to lavish her with money. To back up his claims, he made money transfers, initially sending a couple thousand, then $10,000, and even $100,000 as a birthday gift. Naturally, Grant's lavish spending did not go unnoticed by his parents, since he was using their accounts. At first, he explained these expenditures as investments in his own online project to attract an audience. But Chad and Margaret quickly realized their son was lying. A serious family dispute erupted at home. The father demanded that the youngest son immediately pack his things and leave. But his mother and Kouri intervened on Grant's behalf. The family understood that Grant was suffering from severe internet addiction, but they were baffled about how he had spent nearly $200,000 from their accounts. A thorough search in his room uncovered vials of potent substances. Grant explained he used them to keep from going insane. The parents announced they would cut off his access to their accounts and intended to send him for mandatory treatment for drug and internet addiction. In response, Grant declared he was tired of everything and ready to end his life. He then dashed out of the house, jumped into his car, and sped away at high speed in an unknown direction. Later, it was discovered that Grant went to his aunt and uncle's house, where he crashed through their fence and hit the garage wall. Aware of the turmoil in the Amato family, his relatives sympathized with him and offered him a place to stay until things settled down. He readily agreed, but ended up robbing his kind-hearted relatives instead. The following day, thousands of dollars were stolen from several accounts. The funds were used to pay for interactions with Sylvie. When Grant's aunt informed his parents, they asked her not to involve the police, promising to resolve the issue and return the stolen money promptly. That same day, Chad personally went to their house and took Grant home. Chad, Margaret, and Kouri soon realized that reasoning with Grant was futile. If he left home, he would likely commit theft again. They then presented Grant with a stark choice. He could either go to a rehabilitation clinic for treatment of his addictions or face jail time for theft. Reluctantly, Grant agreed to enter the clinic, where he would spend 2 months away from any temptations. He was admitted to the medical institution at the end of December 2018. During his treatment, Grant's parents checked his computer and discovered how he had been spending thousands of dollars daily from their family accounts. They found Sylvie's profile, the woman who had deeply influenced their son, and reviewed their correspondence, finding hundreds of recordings of their private online interactions. These were moments that Grant treasured and often revisited. The Amos family decided to inform Sylvie about her admirer. They revealed that the man who had showered her with money and gifts was not a businessman, but an unemployed individual with drug and internet addictions. They also pointed out that the funds Grant transferred were stolen, potentially subjecting him to criminal charges. However, Sylvie remained indifferent, as for her, it was just a job, and she had no intention of returning the money. On January 5, 2019, just a couple of weeks into his treatment, Grant unexpectedly returned home after completing less than a quarter of the necessary rehabilitation program. He had fled the clinic, where he was noted for his lack of compliance. Tearfully vowing to turn his life around and find employment, Grant threatened to end his life if forced back into the rehab center. Grant's parents agreed to give him a chance, but imposed strict rules. He was forbidden from using the computer, had to adhere to a schedule, and his earnings were closely monitored. Additionally, he took up a part-time job at a local grocery warehouse. For about 3 weeks, Grant appeared compliant, leading his parents to believe he had matured and left his behind. However, this changed on Thursday, January 24, 2019. On that day, Grant persuaded his mother to let him use the laptop briefly. He claimed he needed it to check his email and post his resume online in search of a more ambitious job than his current warehouse position. Trusting her son, Margaret allowed him access to the laptop, a decision that proved fatal. Naturally, one of Grant's first actions was to contact Sylvie. To his dismay, he discovered that his parents had already written to her, exposing the truth about him. He perceived this as a betrayal. In Grant's view, they had humiliated him in front of the only woman he loved, and he decided they had to pay for that. Remember the home gun collection previously mentioned? Chad had kept most of it in a special large safe for which no one else had the key. Nonetheless, Grant knew about another gun stored in his parents' bedroom, which was always kept loaded by his father. This was the weapon he decided to use. His mother was sitting at the computer in the home office when Grant approached her quietly from behind, and shot her in the back of the head. The position of her body suggested she didn't have time to turn around or understand what was happening. His next target was his father, Chad, who would soon be returning home from work. As soon as Chad entered the kitchen, he was confronted face to face with Grant and immediately received 2 bullets to the chest. Grant tensely contemplated his next move and devised an even more monstrous plan. He decided to frame his own brother, Kouri. Kouri had always stood up for Grant and was considered his best friend. By that time, Kouri had moved out of the family home and was living separately with his girlfriend. To carry out his plan, Grant needed to lure Kouri back home. Grant, using his now deceased father's phone, sent several messages urging his brother to return home immediately due to an undefined emergency. He didn't provide details, confident that this would prompt a quick response. His assumption proved accurate. Kouri left work early and hurried home. Upon entering the house, he barely reached the bottom of the staircase leading to the 2nd floor before being shot and collapsing. Kouri didn't die instantly. He realized the gravity of the situation, but was powerless to act. Afterwards, Grant methodically wiped fingerprints off the pistol and placed it in Kouri's hand to leave prints, staging the scene to suggest Kouri had shot their parents and then himself. The rest of the evening, Grant calmly packed his belongings, downloaded communication files with Sylvie from the computer, and even texted her. Having concluded his tasks, he loaded essentials into his car and drove away. The police quickly tracked Grant down and arrested him at a small roadside motel in Orange County within just over a day. He wasn't surprised but expressed disappointment at being found so quickly while staunchly denying guilt during interrogation. He concocted tales of his father's alleged cruelty toward himself, his mother, and brother. Grant claimed that his father tried to separate him from his girlfriend Sylvie, whom he professed true love for. Regarding the tragic events at their family home on January 24, 2019, Grant's account was confusing and inconsistent. He suggested there had been a fight between his father and brother. According to him, Kouri grabbed a gun and killed Chad, with Margaret becoming an accidental victim. He maintained that he could only guess at these events' chronology as he wasn't present himself. He spent the night in his car with his belongings. In the morning, he simply drove away without realizing the tragedy that had occurred at home. His narrative came across as inconsistent and implausible. Furthermore, the evidence indirectly pointed to him as the sole perpetrator. Consequently, Grant was arrested as the primary suspect in the triple homicide of his family members. Unable to post a $750,000 bond, he remained in custody, awaiting trial. The trial began on July 15, 2019. Notably, almost all witnesses who testified in court spoke against Grant. This included his older brother Jason, relatives, and Kouri's friend Jeremy, from whom Grant had stolen money during their trip to Japan. Those closely acquainted with him described Grant as prone to various addictions, a pathological thief and liar. The main piece of evidence against Grant was a significant bank transfer from Chad's account to Grant's account. This transaction took place late at night when all family members were already deceased. To confirm the transaction, Grant used his deceased father's finger for identification purposes. The prosecution advocated for the death penalty, while his defense argued that Grant was ill and required treatment. On August 12, 2019, a verdict was delivered. The court found 30-year-old Grant Amato guilty of first-degree triple homicide and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The Abril Perez case unveils layers of tragedy and mystery, set against the backdrop of a Mexican night where stars shine brightly, yet secrets linger in the shadows. This story revolves around Abril, whose life became a series of unfortunate events. The case progressed slowly. It took months before the first suspects were captured. The Secretary General of the Mexican Security Council, Omar Garcia, announced that on March 5, 2020, 2 individuals connected to this crime were detained. He made it clear that all detainees had been identified and were under investigation. The initial suspects were Juan Carlos Rodriguez Ortiz, the car driver, and Rodolfo Daniel Bandera Sandoval, also known as Changa Leon, who was identified as the shooter. These two became prime suspects post their arrests. Abril's family insisted on Juan Carlos's arrest, believing him to be the crime's orchestrator. Following an attack on Abril, judges who had initially freed Juan returned to work but faced suspension again due to public outrage. After 7 months, on October 28th, 2 more suspects were detained: Oscar, known as El Oso, and Alejandro, known as El Corral. El Corral was arrested with his girlfriend, Magda Karina. In her bag were found 3 packets of illegal substances alongside a weapon and weighing scales for narcotics. El Oso was apprehended at his home, where police discovered 182 doses of illegal substances, guns, and 300 rounds of large-caliber ammunition. These detainees belonged to a gang led by Juan Carlos Maldon, also known as Juan Balta, who was later arrested too. Known as a trusted leader within one of Mexico City's most notorious gangs, he was found in possession of significant quantities of illegal substances during his capture. Court records indicated that Juan Balta met Juan Carlos while in prison, offering protection for money. After his release, Juan continued receiving financial aid from Balta. It is believed that Juan Carlos sought Balta's assistance to arrange the murder of 2 people who threatened his ex-wife's life. Abril Perez's tale is equally heart-wrenching. Born in Monterrey in 1971, Abril grew up under challenging circumstances with her mother Maria del Suero, tirelessly working to secure the best education in life for Abril and her siblings, Javier and Ana. Despite hardships, Abril excelled academically with a clear goal: achieving financial independence through education. As she matured into an intelligent and altruistic woman with notable leadership qualities, she pursued higher education rigorously. She earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Nuevo León and later acquired her master's degree in business from Monterrey Institute of Science and Technology. Her career flourished in digital sales, where she rose swiftly to hold an executive director position at Bilbao Bank in America by the early 1990s. During this prosperous phase in her career, Abril met Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, a driven entrepreneur born on November 11, 1968. Sharing many academic accolades and professional aspirations, Juan also graduated from Monterrey Institute like Abril and furthered his studies at prestigious institutes such as the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard. Both driven by ambition and intellect, quickly grew close both personally and professionally. They collaborated on several projects while nurturing friendships within shared social circles. Over time, their camaraderie blossomed into love, leading them down the aisle together in 1994. Together, they spearheaded numerous successful ventures, including Pag Mobile and Plascom online stores. Their combined efforts contributed significantly towards establishing DM Store as a leading e-commerce entity in Mexico by 1999. The couple's life appeared to be a genuine fairy tale. Both achieved remarkable successes in their careers and were blissful together. Their joy amplified in 2001 with the birth of their first daughter, Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Juan Carlos Jr., and in 2005, another son, Julio Andres, was born. Despite her busy schedule, Abril always made time for her children, personally attending to their needs and school. Her dedication earned admiration from everyone around her. Juan Carlos was also seen as an exemplary father. Together, they cultivated an ideal family that many envied. But the reality was different. During that period, the family faced substantial challenges, suffering from Juan's short temper. He had a volatile nature and could unleash his anger on anyone around him. Initially, it began with verbal abuse. Juan made Abril uncomfortable with hurtful insults. Gradually, the situation worsened as he started using physical violence, regularly beating his wife. Abril tried to conceal it from friends and family because she believed staying with Juan would secure the best future for their children. By 2009, others began suspecting something was wrong at home due to Abril's evident depression and visible bruises. However, despite inquiries about a possible divorce, she insisted on staying with her husband. The situation continued to get worse up until 2014. Despite Juan Carlos reaching the pinnacle of his career in 2014, As an influential figure in the Amazon retail industry in Mexico, turmoil persisted within the family. By 2015, his new role as Amazon director necessitated a move to Mexico City, a change that did not solve their problems. The abuse continued daily while he maintained a facade of being a loving husband and father publicly. Juan Carlos often shared social media posts calling Abril the love of his life, while privately controlling and accusing her of infidelity, even hiring a detective to prove it. His career soared while his marriage crumbled before his eyes. By 2018, tensions between him and Abril were unbearable. Despite her efforts to maintain family unity after a trip to Monterrey for Christmas celebrations with her family in 2018, an incident made her realize she could no longer continue living with him. During this visit, and driven by irrational rage, Juan strangled Abril after receiving misleading photos from a private investigator, falsely implying an affair with a colleague. On January 4, 2019, Abril finally decided enough was enough and filed for divorce. Early one morning, not long after this decision, while asleep, Abril awoke from severe blows to her head inflicted by Juan wielding a baseball bat, thinking initially that perhaps something catastrophic like ceiling collapse must have occurred, only soon recognizing it was indeed her husband assaulting her maliciously. Attempting desperately but unsuccessfully fleeing, whilst calling out loud, attracting attention, ultimately saved by eldest son, then 16 years old, who intervened preventing further harm, whisking mother off hospital, seeking urgent medical treatment given extensive injuries sustained. Subsequently, following these harrowing events, Juan engaged heavily online, alleging numerous accusations against estranged wife, including infidelity, theft, alongside bizarre claims wounded by stabbing, even posting graphic images incriminatingly, albeit deceptively manipulative, stirring confusion, disbelief, widely questioning veracity, credibility, amidst alarmingly strange, unsupported assertions. Curiously culminating contradictorily, stating sensationally, considerably fabricated declaration, preposterously claiming own premature demise, astonishingly baffling, many, since plainly alive, ative concerned, reflecting potential underlying complexities, yet conspicuously revealing tragically profound adverse impact, profoundly affecting gravely matters warranting earnest consideration, reflective deliberation, insight, acknowledging persistently injustice, undeniably suffered, profoundly consequentially induced, primarily generated, systematically, intentionally premeditated abusive conduct behavior, regrettably adversely experienced, enriched perspective, understanding eloquently articulated herein, professionally gravitating, empathetic recognition, importance, human, judicious appreciating, jointly, responsibly, collectively, fostering principled integrity, social positive transformation, conducive, harmonious, peaceful, equitable coexistence, pivotal, quintessential, consequential, imperative. After being discharged from the hospital, Abril immediately filed a police report against her husband. Authorities granted her custody of her 2 children. Juan Carlos was ordered to pay alimony of 6,000 Mexican pesos per month, about $350. However, this amount did not cover the costs of raising 2 young children. Despite these financial difficulties and the fear of her husband, Abril decided to start a new chapter in her life and was determined not to be discouraged for the sake of her children. Subsequently, Abril and her children moved to Monterrey. From there, she observed the trial against Juan Carlos and filed for divorce. After enduring such a traumatic experience and constant abuse, she began rethinking her life decisions. She joined a Christian group dedicated to protecting families and started working as a divorce counselor. Her goal was to create an organization that would help women who had been abused like she had been. Thanks to such an organization, Abril herself managed to heal and even forgave her ex-husband. While she was striving to rebuild her life, the lawsuit against Juan continued. After 9 long months following the attack, authorities charged him with attempted murder. The case went to court where Judge Federico Mask decided on an informal arrest for Juan. Thus, he was taken into custody for several weeks. However, Juan appealed the verdict, and on November 3, 2019, another judge, named Hector Jimenez, reclassified the crime. He opined that photographs from the hospital and testimonies from Abril and her son were insufficient to prove Juan's guilt definitively. Moreover, he believed that Juan did not intend to kill Abril, otherwise he would have succeeded. According to the judge, the baseball bat used in the attack was not considered a weapon suitable for murder. Consequently, the case no longer qualified as femicide, and Juan's preliminary arrest was canceled. There were only a few hearings left in Juan's trial. The outcome remained uncertain, causing increasing anxiety and frustration for Abril, her family, and friends. Desperately seeking relief, Abril wrote a letter to the judge pleading for consideration of her fears for her safety. She firmly believed Juan posed a real threat, but received no response to her plea. Following this development, Juan Carlos was released from custody and began actively fighting for custody of his children. Abril had no choice but to leave Monterrey and travel to Mexico City frequently for all hearings related to their case, and subjected her children to psychological evaluations because Juan Carlos claimed she had turned them against him. This supposedly explained why they wanted nothing more than distance from their father forever again. A week before crucial hearing session date drew near, the crucial one, Abril gathered 3 kids, telling them how much love felt, pushing each towards dreams fulfillment while urging strength needed forgiveness. Side note, relatable indeed. On November 25th, in compliance throughout with ex's instructions avoiding legal tangles, separating loved ones altogether, arrived Mexico City, intended meeting, taking place same day when thousands, women marked street celebration, Anti-Gender Violence Day, globally impactful symbol, indeed reflecting broader struggle ongoingly seen, meanwhile yes, continuing relentless fight, march, so to speak, right? Time passed until March 19th next year, bringing turning point judicial-wise, canceling previous handling actions, revisiting the settling attempted murder. Abril reinstated following collective push, relatives prosecution line formal appeals requiring plus subsequent petitions array highlighting repetition involving case assuring dominion. Finally May settled arrests, finalized trio women Solomon rounding elements critical search warrants, altogether findings detailed captured each identified notably care overall, background thoroughness punctuate course interims pan explaining prosecutor touching essence clarifications, juxtaposing initial attempt, comparably then elevating upholding right societal realms, subsequently prompted sweeping comprehensive research, yielding vital breakthrough imperative efforts nearing affirmative closure, integrity bind scrutinizing laying hopper diverse parallel obligations extended Rawls pursuit persistently subsequently engaged recognized alias Shalon loop continued fundamentally. During the interrogation, Rolf, also known as El Shalon, confessed that he was the individual who shot and killed Abril. Ultimately, he pleaded guilty, stating that Juan Carlos had offered him $10,000 to commit the crime. He detailed how Juan Carlos had contacted him while still in pretrial detention. Over the phone, Juan provided Abril's address in Mexico City, along with instructions on how to perform surveillance on her and execute the crime. Furthermore, Juan assured him that a gun would be waiting for him in Monterrey. Rolf recounted going to Monterrey expecting to receive the firearm. However, no one reached out to him for several days. He then returned to his residence in Mexico City and did not hear from Juan Carlos again until Juan's release from prison. Upon his release, Juan contacted Rolf with updated plans. Now wanted Abril killed in Mexico City since he had managed to lure her there. Due to procedural rules, these cases couldn't be consolidated. Thus, they were divided into separate hearings. The initial trial focused solely on Rodolfo Daniel Bendes, the direct perpetrator, and Juan Carlos Rodriguez. Subsequent trials would involve the other accused parties. In August 2022, the first round of court proceedings commenced. During these sessions, the prosecutor's office presented testimonies from 28 witnesses and 14 pieces of expert evidence. Rolf El Shalon detailed how he planned and executed the murder and once again pleaded guilty. On May 19, 2023, the court found Rodolfo Daniel Bendes and Juan Carlos Rodriguez guilty of committing femicide and sentenced them each to 52 years in prison. Additionally, they were ordered to pay 56,000 Mexican pesos, approximately $30,000 in damages. Following their conviction, they were transferred to a pretrial detention center to begin their sentences. The Abril family publicly announced their intention to appeal Rodolfo's sentence. They considered it too lenient, given his direct involvement in her death, further complicating matters regarding other defendants. In October 2014, a judge decided to split the trials of 4 defendants: Juan Carlos Maldonado, Juan Baldra, Eli Carnal, Amada Viente Rodriguez, and Garcia Alicia Flores, into separate hearings. Prosecutors opposed this decision due to concerns it would prolong the legal process and incur additional costs since each defendant would need to testify multiple times. Abril's tragic fate deeply unsettled not only her family, but also society at large in Mexico. Just when it seemed justice was within reach through these trials, they resumed yet again under distressing circumstances surrounding her demise. According to reconstructed events, after one such court hearing, Abril entered a car with her children and legal counsel en route back home via Monterrey Airport, where an assassin on motorcycle ambushed them at an intersection near their route, opening fire specifically targeting her head, while miraculously sparing most occupants inside, except grazing one's limb incidentally. Despite transporting Abril alive, hospital's efforts ended vainly, succumbing injuries 6 hours arriving tragic incident shockwaves through community. Especially Javier brother, urgent quest resolve misconceptions pervading suspicions, implicate, released prisoner officially. However, authorities declared unknown identity, intent shooter impeded, qualifying categorization femicide, necessary apprehension sought. That's why this case was classified simply as a murder, and the police launched an investigation to gather all necessary evidence to consider it a femicide. Abril's friend took to social media to discuss the situation, accusing Juan Carlos. This accusation led to her account being deleted. Abril's family feared that this man would go unpunished for his actions. They sought public attention through social media as well. Abril passed away on a day commemorating the fight against gender-based violence. Her death took on added significance because of this. The family organized numerous protests and marches in her honor, demanding justice. Social media users began discussing how Abril had expressed her fear many times and how authorities ignored her pleas for help. Amid their grief and frustration, Abril's family and friends held a funeral in Monterrey with a mass at the Bonito Flores Chapel. Dozens came to extend condolences and honor Abril's memory, also demanding justice. The procession moved to the Pantheon Garden in Los Angeles for the burial. Abril's case highlighted issues around gender-based violence, especially those involving judges releasing men who attacked women. Ex-husband Juan Carlos was released after appeals, which allowed him to bring Abril to Mexico City unimpeded, leading to her death. The Mexican General Prosecutor's Office initiated an investigation against judges Carlos Trillo Rodriguez, Federico Mosa Gonzalez, and Hector Jimenez Lopez for enabling Juan Carlos's release from prison. Members of the former president's party also got involved. Andrés Manuel López Obrador urged the removal of Judge Mosca in the Chamber of Deputies due to his involvement in a controversial case where he freed a doctor accused of disrespecting a patient in a public hospital. Charges were downgraded from femicide to sexual violence, leading to his release. During the scandal surrounding Abril's case on November 29th, Rafael Gara, president of Mexico City's Supreme Court, temporarily suspended all judges involved in Juan Carlos's case. Claudia Sheinbaum, head of government for Mexico City, confirmed an investigation into Abril's case as femicide was underway. If proven that Juan Carlos was responsible, judges involved could face consequences. Local and international media reported that despite evidence against him, Juan was released during legal proceedings. The family announced forming the Voice of Abril, a nonprofit aimed at offering information and support for violence victims. Protests over Abril's death pushed for reclassification against Juan Carlos, so he would face attempted murder charges leading potentially to imprisonment. After being charged, Juan posted online that he wished for justice in resolving Abril's crime and expressed willingness to cooperate with police, while stating conflicts with Abril were not fatal, leading community outrage. His daughter Anna Cecilia publicly accused him of years-long physical and mental abuse towards Abril and their children too, sharing photos purportedly showing Abril hospitalized following an attack by him with a baseball bat, according to herself. Her father was a narcissistic sociopath who got out of prison by bribing officials. A few days later, amidst the ongoing investigation and protests, an arrest warrant was issued for Juan Carlos. Not due to the Abril case, but rather for violating judicial duties. He had been released on the condition he'd visit the police station weekly. However, he failed to comply. Additionally, he missed 2 court hearings. Judge Agustin Monreal Gaspar subsequently revoked his release order. During one hearing, the judge read out a letter from Juan claiming he feared for his life and hence avoided attending the hearings. He mentioned that since Abril's death, both he and his family had received threats, believing that appearing in court could lead to someone seeking revenge on him. Nonetheless, the judge did not accept this as a valid excuse and thus issued an arrest warrant. Juan was also barred from leaving the country. Meanwhile, the investigation pressed on, with authorities determined to uncover the entire truth. As part of their efforts, they came across another letter written by Juan, where he again denied any involvement in Abril's death. He asserted he never wished her harm and had no intent to kill her. He narrated his version of events from that night. According to him, they argued and Abril first picked up a knife and stabbed him in the side. He claimed hitting her with a bat was his first act of self-defense and maintained he never attempted to take her life. Naturally, this letter incensed those present at its reading. None found Juan Carlos's words credible. The investigation pointed towards Juan Carlos as the primary suspect in this matter. Furthermore, police identified at least 7 other individuals implicated in the crime against Abril after analyzing surveillance footage from nearby where these events occurred. The videos depicted 2 cars trailing Abril as she departed from the courthouse. Both drivers were communicating with the individual who ultimately fired the fatal shot at Abril's head. Post-attack footage showed all 3 vehicles speeding away from the scene together. Although identities of those involved were not established at that point, investigators concluded there was strong evidence suggesting Juan Carlos's involvement in orchestrating this crime. Investigators believed that Juan had met these individuals during his time in prison and had compensated one of them to ensure his safety. According to their findings, the people who protected him were released from prison, followed by Juan's release. Subsequently, he allegedly paid them to end Abril's life. Only Juan knew precisely Abril's route to Mexico City because he was the one who requested meeting with her. When this information came to light, no law firm wanted to represent him. Abril's family, friends, and colleagues provided all possible information to the authorities to facilitate his capture. However, a few days later, sources from the country's general prosecutor's office reported that Juan had left Mexico. They indicated that he managed to flee by crossing the border between Mexico and the United States. Mexican authorities promptly contacted Interpol to circulate information about the search for Juan Carlos, and Interpol immediately commenced their search for him. Soon enough, he was wanted by authorities in over 151 countries, determined to locate him at any cost. By late January 2024, there were no new developments in the case. 4 years have passed since Abril's tragic death without any accountability for those responsible for this crime. Her children are now living with her family on the outskirts of Mexico City, clinging to hope that justice will eventually be served. To this day, everyone is asking, where is Juan Carlos? His apprehension remains a top priority for law enforcement agencies. Abril's family has vowed not to cease their fight for justice until he is found and held accountable. In June of 1995, it seemed like life couldn't possibly get any better for Mark and Donna Winger. The nuclear technician and his wife had been happily married for several years, and they had just adopted a newborn baby girl named Bailey. Donna was the oldest of 3 sisters in what they described as an incredibly close-knit family. The Dreschers grew to love Mark too. He was smart, Jewish, He was attractive and he was fun, Donna's sister, Jenny Levin, told the media. Donna just felt like she had found her person. After Mark and Donna Winger were married in 1989, he was offered a job, and the newlyweds settled in Springfield, Illinois. We always joked about the fact when one sister marries, that husband marries three sisters, Levin said. We shared our lives with Mark. Donna was working as an operating room technician and Mark was a nuclear engineer. Donna couldn't have been happier. The only thing she would have liked to was to have a child, her stepfather, Ira Drescher, said. Donna's mother, Sarah Jane Drescher, said her daughter was overwhelmed when she learned that she could not get pregnant. But then one day while working at the hospital, a doctor told Donna that a teenager was looking to put her baby up for adoption. Adopting the child was an easy decision for her. She looked at me with tears when she said, "Michelle, I knew it the minute they put the baby into my arms. She has always been mine," Donna's sister Michelle Hansen said. The Wingers welcomed baby Bailey into their home on June 1, 1995. Donna's family said the couple loved their new roles as parents. They seemed to have all the makings of a long and happy life together. Mark was just as excited to become a dad as Donna was to become a mom, Hansen said. Donna had met the woman who would eventually become her best friend, Deanne Schultz, at the hospital, and with the arrival of Bailey, the two bonded over motherhood. But then everything turned dark. In August 1995, Donna took baby Bailey on a trip to Hollywood, Florida, to visit Donna's family. Her mother had just dropped the two of them off at the airport and hired a driver to pick them up in St. Louis, Missouri, and drive them back to Springfield. So after the visit, the two flew into St. Louis Airport and hopped in a cab driven by Roger Harrington with a 2-hour ride back to Springfield. During the course of the drive, Harrington reportedly began flirting with Donna and talking about drugs and orgies. Detective Charlie Cox, a police officer who investigated Donna's death, later said, "This gentleman started opening up to Donna about issues he was having. He had a voice in his head named Dom. Dom would tell him to do bad things. Recently, Dom was telling him to hurt people." After Donna safely arrived home with Bailey, she called the transit company to make a formal complaint about Harrington's behavior, and the driver was suspended. Cox later said that the driver started flirting with Donna, telling her he liked older women and even invited her to attend what he described as one of his sex parties. Donna had told her family that the ride was terrifying because he was driving erratically at 75 miles per hour. After the harrowing ride, Donna had been the victim of some strange phone calls, Weinhoft said. The family had believed that the driver had been stalking her and was a danger. Donna called the limousine company to file a complaint and Harrington was suspended. Mark argued his wife to write down the story in case they might need it. Police later found the note describing Donna's harrowing ride in her handwriting at the crime scene. Donna also told Mark about the experience, and though he played a part of the supportive husband and helped her file the complaint, it turned out that he had ulterior motives for doing so. Just days later, Mark invited Harrington to their home, perhaps under the pretense of helping him get his job back. On the 29th of August 1995, the cab driver wrote Mark's name, address, and the time on a scrap of paper in his car, drove to the Wingers' home, walked inside with a coffee cup and a pack of cigarettes, and was shot twice in the head. Mark Winger then called 911 and told the dispatcher he'd just shot a man who was killing his wife. He informed police that he'd been walking on the treadmill in the basement when he heard a commotion upstairs. He grabbed his gun, went to investigate, and found Harrington swinging a hammer at Donna. In an effort to defend his wife, he'd shot the man twice. Police arrived on the scene to find that both Donna and Harrington still had a weak pulse. Mark was in a back bedroom, rolling back and forth in total shock. When former Springfield police detective Charlie Cox arrived at the Wingers' home, he remembered they could see the victims from the front door. Donna was clinging to life, said Sangamon County Assistant State Attorney Steve Weinholt. She had been hit no less than 7 times in the head with a hammer. The second victim, a white man, had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, but still had a pulse when police arrived, said Weinholt. It was quite chaotic, Cox said. I knew that they were probably going to be transporting the victim soon, so I wanted to try and get identification on the male suspect. Cox found the man's wallet and was able to identify him as Roger Harrington. Police recovered a bloody hammer near the 2 bodies and found Mark's .45 caliber semi-automatic handgun, a yellow mug, and a pack of cigarettes on the same dining table. They also noticed that Harrington's car had been parked against traffic, facing the wrong direction, At the crime scene, Cox said Mark was very upset and very emotional, and that he repeatedly asked who the man he'd killed was. Cox avoided identifying Harrington and tried to calm Mark down. As police combed through the scene, Mark asked police if the intruder's name was Roger. Cox confirmed that it was. Mark was shocked and he said, "Oh my gosh, that's the man who's been harassing my wife this week," Cox said. Cox, who was familiar with Harrington after he'd lived in a trailer park owned by Cox, believed Harrington might have snapped. "I knew him as a very volatile type subject. He and his wife rented a trailer for me," Cox said. "Knowing what I knew about Mr. Harrington in the past, how quick he was to anger, I thought that very well he could have gone over there to try to get his job back. There's a hammer laying right there on the table. He picks it up and goes into a rage, then the husband shoots the bad guy." Tragically, both victims succumbed to their injuries. After learning about Donna's previous run-in with Harrington and listening to Mark's version of events, the police closed the case within days, listing Roger Harrington as the culprit. Because once police examined the scene and listened to Mark's story, detectives concluded that he had acted in self-defense. The case was closed in about 48 hours, Weinhoft said. But Harrington's family insisted from the beginning that their son was harmless. "He was no troublemaker. He was a good kid. He wouldn't even strike at anybody," his mother, Helen Harrington, said. "I don't think he would hurt anybody, and I don't think he was crazy." So it seemed like Mark Winger was going to get away with murder. Donna's mother spoke to the media about the evening, and the family received the news of her daughter's murder. "It was 4 in the morning, and I said, 'Jenny, it's Mom. Something terrible has happened,'" Sarah Jane Drescher said of her call to Levin. "We sat there in my room, just crying at this unimaginable loss," Levin said. In the following months, Donna's mother and sister took turns traveling to Illinois to help take care of Bailey. "I loved Mark because he loved Donna, and that's what was important to me," Sarah Jane Drescher said. "But I had to be very careful because I did not want to ruin my relationship with him, because I did not want to ruin my relationship with the baby. I wanted to be a grandma, and Bailey made me a grandma." Mark was now a single father raising his infant daughter on his own. Donna's family initially flew to Illinois to help out, but they couldn't stay, and they suggested Mark hire a nanny. In January 1996, he met 23-year-old Rebecca Simic, who was searching for a nanny job in the area. Rebecca told reporters, "It just felt like Bailey was the one that really needed me the most. She had been through so much already at the age of 3 months." Rebecca was wonderful with Bailey, and even Donna's family agreed that she was like an angel sent to help Mark. While she felt a little uncomfortable in the house, where 2 people had died violently, she was dedicated to giving Bailey a good childhood despite the trauma of losing her mother. "I didn't want to like Rebecca, but it was hard not to like her," Levin said. "Seeing her with Bailey, there was really nothing bad we could say about her." Meanwhile, Rebecca's role at Mark's home had begun to evolve. When you live with someone and you're taking care of a child together, it's very easy to kind of play house. Rebecca said later on. Rebecca told the media that she was blown away by what the infant had been through in such a short time. "Mark made me feel like I was like an angel sent to him from God or Donna, and it was my purpose to make this family whole again," Rebecca said. She lost 2 mothers by the time she was 3 months old, and she was so smiley, Rebecca said. "I wanted to get in there and say, I'm going to help and I'm going to make this little girl's life better." Mark helped Rebecca feel at ease in her new role. After a few months, the two found themselves sharing conversation and a glass of wine at the end of a long day. And then one thing led to another as their relationship turned intimate. Within the year, Rebecca was pregnant with Mark's child. The couple eloped in Hawaii in October 1996, just 14 months after Donna's death. "I remember asking him how he could move on so quickly," Rebecca later recalled. "And he explained to me that when you have a good marriage, it's natural for you to just want that again." Rebecca said Mark had told her he wasn't able to have children, so she said she was very surprised when she found out she was pregnant with his child only months after moving in. "Obviously, I wasn't careful. It was just kind of a shock," she said. Mark, on the other hand, was thrilled, Rebecca recalled. "It felt like it was a victory to him," she said. "Mark put pressure on me to marry him and have children with him." Rebecca said that Mark, who was Jewish when they met, even started going to church with her. She said he told her they could raise a family in a Christian home. "I would be honored to be your husband and blessed if you were my wife," Mark wrote in a letter to Rebecca. Mark's rabbi, Michael Datz, asked him about his change in faith, and he said that Mark explained, Judaism is just too difficult and unforgiving. Rabbi Datz didn't understand, asking, "Mark, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you need forgiveness for?" He said Mark didn't respond. But then it seemed like Mark was trying almost a little too hard to leave the past behind. 16 months after his wife's death, Mark told Sarah Jane Drescher that he was going to sell the house where her daughter Donna had died and buy another one just outside of town. He and Rebecca had started a family of their own, and he started cutting ties with Donna's parents. "I received a letter from Mark one day saying to me I could not be called Grandma," Sarah Jane Drescher said. "I wrote him back and I begged him, please let her call me Grandma. And he said, I'm sorry, there's no way I am going to allow her to call you Grandma, and that's the way it is." Sarah said she mourned that loss for a long time. Bailey Simic, now 25, told reporters that her grandmother and grandfather, Ira Drescher, would send a birthday card to her every year. "I always remember asking my mom, 'Who's Sarah Jane and Ira?' she said. My mom would always explain, like, 'Those are Donna's parents, and they just want to let you know that, like, they love you and that they remember you.'" Eventually, Mark sold the house where Donna had died and moved with his new wife to the suburbs outside of Springfield. Things seemed great on the surface. They had 3 children together, and Rebecca raised Bailey as her daughter. Though chaotic, their life seemed almost perfect. Mark was a loving partner and a very involved father. That would all change quite soon. One day in early 1909, when Mark was feeling ill, Rebecca took him to the emergency room in the hospital where Donna had worked before her death. There they saw Donna's best friend and co-worker, Deanne Schultz. She seemed upset to see Mark, and Rebecca remembered that Deanne had acted strangely when she first came on Bailey's nanny, as if she were anxious to stay involved in Bailey's life. After they returned home, Mark commented that may not be the last they heard from Deanne. He was right. In February 1999, Deanne dropped a bombshell on the police, revealing that she and Mark had been having an affair before Donna's death. She said that, at one point, he'd remarked to her that things would be easier for them if Donna was dead. She told them that after Donna's fateful ride with Roger Harrington, Mark said that he needed to get that driver to the house. "All you'd need to do is find the body," he told her. Deanne never thought Mark was serious, but when Donna turned up dead soon after, she knew he had done it. Mark had threatened her not to tell anyone about the things he'd said, and she'd attempted suicide several times while struggling with her guilt. After seeing him in the hospital, she decided she couldn't keep quiet any longer. After hearing Deanne's story, police decided to take a closer look at the evidence from the day of the murders. The more they thought about what they'd once assumed was an open and shut case, the more questions they had. Why were there no signs of forced entry into the Winger home that August day? Why would Roger Harrington bring his cup of coffee and cigarettes into the house with him if he'd planned to attack Donna? And why would he use the Winger's hammer as a weapon when he had a tire iron and a knife in his car? At that point, investigators came upon 3 never-before-seen Polaroid photos taken the day of the murders. They'd been with the evidence collected in a civil suit Mark had filed against the transportation company that had employed Harrington. The position of the bodies in the photos showed that Mark's version of events were not possible. Mark Winger had stated that Roger Harrington was kneeling right next to Donna Winger's head, and he was beating her with a hammer, Weinhoft explained. He stated that he shot him and that the man fell backward so that his feet remained near Donna's head. In reality, the Polaroid photographs show the exact opposite. Blood spatter experts agreed. Cox later told the media, "I was ashamed of the way the investigation went. I heard Roger Harrington's family. I ran his name through hell for no reason. I mean, he was an innocent victim." It had become clear that Mark was the real murderer behind the scenes the whole time. Rebecca Simic was left to make sense of the tragedy. She had no idea what Mark was capable of, and afterward, she moved her 4 children out of Springfield to feel safer. While Mark had tried to keep Bailey away from Donna's family, Rebecca encouraged them to be reunited. "We'd been hurt a lot by the same person," Rebecca said, "but it didn't break us." Donna's family and Rebecca spoke to reporters about the horrific realization that Mark was a manipulative killer hiding behind the mask of a brilliant engineer and a kind, loving husband and father. In December 1999, more than 4 years after the murders, the Springfield State Journal-Register ran an article based on allegations in the civil lawsuit that Mark had arranged the murder himself and killed both his wife and Harrington. The allegations were based on a blood spatter expert hired by Bark Transportation in the case after the arrest of their employee Harrington. Everything came to a head. It changed everything, Rebecca said of the article. I mean, it went from Mark as the hero who was defending his wife, this noble stand-up guy that every man wanted to pat on the back, to a manipulative, deviant murderer. As the detectives continued their reinvestigation, they learned that Harrington's roommate, Susan Collins, had initially told police that someone asked to meet with Harrington on the day of the murders and that she had seen Harrington on the phone arranging that meeting. Inside Harrington's car, they found a note written on a bank deposit slip with Mark's name, his address, and the time to be there. Roger Harrington was not an intruder, but rather he was lured into that home by Mark Winger, Weinhoft said. Deanne Schultz's cooperation with police and evidence that raised questions about Mark's story prompted the voluntary dismissal of the civil suit against Bark Transportation. I didn't see it coming, Rebecca said. I didn't know that this whole investigation was brewing. I never thought the whole time that they thought my husband was a diabolical murderer. A warrant was issued for Mark's arrest, and he was taken into custody while at work. I had made plans to go to McDonald's Playland, Rebecca recalled. We were there and I got a phone call, and it was Mark's secretary, and she told me that Mark had just been arrested. I was just sick. Like my whole body kind of went numb, and I just couldn't believe it. I was shaking so badly, and I just remembered feeling so scared. I felt that I owed it to him and to my kids to just stand by him, she said. Hanson, Donna's sister, said she didn't feel relieved following Mark's arrest. I still wanted to believe he was innocent, she said. Here's this person that I know in handcuffs, and what's going to happen? Bailey was just 6 years old at the time of Mark's arrest. She said no longer having her father home was scary. I just remember everyone just trying to remain calm and kind of, at the time, being like, Dad's just going away for a while and that he'll be back soon, she said. But that was no longer possible. On August 23, 2001, Mark Winger was indicted for the murders of Donna Winger and Roger Harrington. At the trial in May 2002, a visibly shaky Deanne testified against Mark. The court granted her immunity in exchange for her testimony, though there was no evidence linking her to anything other than keeping Mark's terrible secret. Mark was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. One of the key points the prosecution had to prove was that Harrington had gone to the house to meet with the Wingers, not to commit a murder. They presented the cigarettes and coffee mug that he'd brought inside, as well as the weapons he'd left in his car and the note with Mark's name and address. Mark's attorney argued that Harrington was mentally ill, that he behaved erratically, and that these traits indicated he was capable of murder. When prosecutors presented the Polaroid showing the position of the bodies before they were removed from the scene, Mark's attorney argued throughout the trial that first responders could have moved the bodies. It's our belief that Roger comes to the house, he's allowed into the home, now retired Detective Jim Graham said. There were no signs of forced entry, and he was executed at that time. Hearing the gunshot, Donna Winger then comes from the bathroom to investigate. He then beats his wife to death with a hammer. Mark then calls 911. In the 911 call, someone can be heard moaning in the background. When Mark tells the operator he can hear his baby crying and hangs up. He had told the operator there was a bullet in Harrington's head, but when police arrived, Harrington had been shot twice. Deanne also gave damning testimony at the trial, saying that Mark told her it would be easier if Donna just died. I thought it was crazy talk, she said during her cross-examination. After a chance meeting years later, Deanne testified that she confronted Mark in the hopes of gathering information and asked him how he lived with himself, and that he'd replied that he had found Jesus Christ and was forgiven. She said he warned her that if she ever said anything, they would both be in trouble. I didn't think that anybody would believe her, Rebecca said. I just thought if Mark truly did that, she would have come forward right away. Mark's defense argued that Deanne was emotionally unstable and just a woman who had been scorned. Deanne Schultz's testimony was able to demonstrate that, in reality, Mark was obviously unhappy, unfaithful, and had specifically talked about wanting to kill his wife, Weinhoft said. Schultz was granted immunity for her testimony, he added. There was no direct evidence that directly linked Deanne to actively participating in this crime. In the end, she was such a valuable witness as it relates to presenting the motive. After a trial that lasted 3 weeks, the jury found Mark Winger guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, Rebecca said she believed he would be going home with them. After the verdict, she said the words guilty rang through her head and that she wanted the earth to open up and swallow me. Sarah Jane Drescher and her daughters, Donna's sisters, were with her when they heard the verdict. The three of us just embraced and cried, she said. And the story gets even more twisted, because 4 years later, Mark was also sentenced to an additional 35 years in prison when he tried to hire a hitman to kill Deanne, or testifying against him. He even attempted to put out a hit against a childhood friend who had refused to pay his bail. Helen Harrington was relieved and grateful that her son had been vindicated of Donna's murder. We knew that Roger was innocent, and it finally got proven, she said. He was branded a murderer at the time, but then all this came to an end. The police also had to come to terms with the faulty initial investigation. I was ashamed of the way the investigation went, Cox said. I heard Roger Harrington's family. I ran his name through hell for no reason. I mean, he was an innocent victim. The police department had too hastily closed the case and turned a blind eye to some red flags, and to right such a wrong, it felt great, Bram added. But Rebecca said there wasn't any closure for her or her family. When we lose someone, you know, we gather. We have a funeral, Rebecca shared. But when someone goes to prison, well, what do? You're just kind of left with this emptiness and this hole that you can't really have closure with that. It wasn't just him being sentenced to life, she said. We were sentenced to a life of a father in prison. Bailey Simic says she missed having her father around while growing up. It was really hard being in school, seeing all the other kids have their dads and that relationship, she said. And now suddenly, I couldn't just go to my dad's room or have him pick us up from school or anything like that. Ben Simic was only a year old when his dad went to prison. I can look at the pictures and look at myself and say, that kid has no idea. He was way too young to know anything that was going on, he said. Rebecca had to move out of Springfield with her kids, and the home that she'd bought with Mark was foreclosed. She had been a stay-at-home mom for 7 years, so she had no option but to file for bankruptcy. I didn't have anything to give my kids. Everything had been taken away. All I had was love, she said. Rebecca never remarried as far as we know. She raised all 4 of the children on her own. And Bailey has since reunited with Donna's family. It was so incredible to see that there's this whole big family that loves me, and Sarah Jane still has my baby picture on her kitchen counter with all of her other grandkids, even though we've been gone for so long, she said. We've been hurt a lot by the same person, but it didn't break us, Rebecca said. Although Sarah Jane Drescher says there will never be closure for the murder of her daughter, the family has worked together to set up Donna's Fund, which is a part of Women in Distress, an organization that works to provide shelter for women trying to escape abuse. I think her legacy will live on through people that we help, Levin said, and through the beautiful memories that we have of her. So what do you think of this crazy, twisted case of murder uncovered? Would Mark Winger still be walking scot-free today if his former lover, Deanne Schultz, hadn't developed a guilty conscience? 22-year-old Brandon Gonsalves lived with his small family in Goregaon West. Now Goregaon West was becoming a crowded suburb in Mumbai city. Besides Gonsalves, his family only consisted of his mother and older sister. On December 19, 2016, like every day, Gonsalves went for a morning walk from his home to Ari Colony. Usually, he would return home within an hour after his stroll, but today he didn't come back until afternoon. Concerned, Gonsalves' mother, Seema, and older sister, Kashma, first called his friends because he had left his phone at home today. Despite contacting some friends, they couldn't find any information about Gonsalves. Now, the sun had already set, and night was slowly falling. Worried about their son, Seema took her daughter and went to the nearby Dindoshi police station to file a missing person report. Now, besides Gonsalves' family and friends, the police are also trying to find him. Meanwhile, the Dindoshi police station had distributed Gonsalves' photo to nearby police stations as well. However, amidst this, around 12:30 in the afternoon on December 22nd, a call comes to the nearby Ari police station. The caller reports that he has just seen a headless body. Upon hearing this, the police promptly rushed to the reported location in Ari Colony. Upon arrival, the scene that they witness astonishes them. There, beneath a tree, lies a body without a head, neck, or clothes. and upon seeing it, it seemed as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Now, witnessing this sight, the police cordoned off the area completely, not allowing any ordinary person to approach. Afterwards, the police began their investigation by first examining the area nearby. Just 20 meters away from the body, the police found the head and clothes stained with blood. Additionally, a few meters away from the body, the police also found some other items used in worship, such as a mirror, coconut, padukas, threads, turmeric powder, and kumkum powder, aka vermilion. Anyway, the police collected these items and sent the body to a nearby hospital for post-mortem. Subsequently, the files of missing persons were checked at the Kouri police station, and the identification of this dead body was made with a boy named Brandon Gonsalves. As I mentioned earlier, the missing report of Brandon Gonsalves had been distributed to all nearby police stations by Dindoshi police. So now the Kouri police confirmed that he was the same boy who had gone missing 3 days ago on December 19th. Well, now Gonsalves' family is also informed, and thus the missing case of Gonsalves turns into a murder case. After this, as far as I have read, perhaps the police had to form 8+ teams to search for Gonsalves' killer, including a special team from the crime branch. But seeing the body of her only son in this condition, Gonsalves' mother Seema and elder sister Kashma were both in a terrible state of distress. So much so that when Seema saw her son in this condition, she fainted upon seeing the body. However, the police quickly began their investigation to find the culprits. On the other hand, some shocking details emerged in Gonsalves' post-mortem report. The post-mortem report stated that Gonsalves' tongue, voice box, skin from his right cheek, and even his entire neck were missing, with the neck bone intact. This means that someone had killed Gonsalves so brutally that even the small spine is fragment of our neck, the neck spine, was broken. All these things were horrifying the police because initially, the police thought this case seemed to be a result of personal rivalry, as if someone had killed Gonsalves to settle a score, but the police were soon to be proven wrong. Actually, according to the post-mortem report, it was found that Gonsalves' death occurred due to the separation of his head from his body. However, forensic pathologists also checked whether Gonsalves was given any drugs or substances before being killed, but nothing like that was found in any post-mortem report. After that, the police found out that Gonsalves was murdered 3 days before his body was found, between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the same day he went missing. Additionally, there were no signs of any fight, struggle, or injury on his body, indicating that Gonsalves didn't even try to save himself until his last breath. Furthermore, 2 marks were found on Gonsalves' body. Actually, there were 2 cross symbols on his forehead and right hand, which seemed to have been made with a sharp object. After learning about all these things, this case became even more intriguing for the police and investigators, because now there were a lot more questions in front of the police. Looking at Gonsalves' body, it seemed as if his body had been cut twice. First, his head was separated from his shoulders, and then later his neck was cut from the head. Additionally, forensic experts said that where Gonsalves' body was found, there was absolutely no evidence of his murder, if not a single trace of blood was found there. So it was clear that Gonsalves was killed somewhere else, and then some parts of his body were removed to perform some rituals or something similar. Later, his body and clothes were thrown away in this deserted place. Here, when the police found the materials of worship and glass, coconuts, slippers, turmeric, and vermilion at the crime scene, for the first time, this case seems like a human sacrifice. After the possibility arose that Gonsalves might be taken to another location and harmed, the police began checking the CCTV cameras around the Kouri colony. But first, they checked the CCTV cameras around his house. They saw Gonsalves leaving with his dog around 7 o'clock in the morning and returning after a morning walk within an hour. However, just 10 minutes later, Gonsalves left his house again, but this time with a bag. Now, what was in that bag could not be determined because the bag itself was not found. But then, a little further from Gonsalves' house, the police spotted a white Audi car in another CCTV footage, with 2 people inside, a driver and a woman in a white Punjabi suit. It was shown in the CCTV that they were following Gonsalves slowly with their car. The woman wearing a white Punjabi suit is given directions to the driver, telling him to take the car in that direction. However, the police also questioned Gonsalves' family members to see if anyone might know that woman and driver, but the police didn't get any good response from there either. The police suspected that there might be more than 2 people in the car, and unfortunately, the day Gonsalves' body was found, the 2 CCTV cameras in that area were not working. This raised suspicion for the police that Gonsalves was abducted on December 19th in this same car and then murdered elsewhere, with his body being thrown in a deserted place in Kouri Colony on the dark night or morning of December 22nd. But since then, investigators have felt that perhaps a local person might be involved in this murder case, because the police checked 70-plus CCTV cameras in this entire case, but none of them recorded anything suspicious that would raise suspicion on any individual. The investigators clarified that perhaps the killers were aware of the location of every CCTV camera in the Kouri Colony. This helped them in escaping from the colony and Goragan. This clears one thing, that the killer was someone who was well acquainted with Goragan and the colony, because an outsider couldn't have known every road in CCTV so well. The investigators explored all possible angles of Gonsalves' killing, such as a love affair angle, whether someone jealous killed Gonsalves, and a personal rivalry, human sacrifice angle, robbery, and property dispute. But the police never found any leads in any angle. Although for some time, the police kept the angle of human sacrifice on the table and even questioned several tantrics, babas, and black magicians about the cut parts of the body, the mark of the cross on the forehead and the right hand, whether there was any connection between them or not. But the police didn't get any help from here either. Gonsalves was a middle-class boy who decided to graduate in arts. However, due to some reasons, he dropped out of college as well. His father had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Gonsalves in a state of depression for a long time. During the police investigation, Gonsalves' call records were also checked, but no suspicious numbers were found. In fact, Gonsalves rarely talked to anyone, except for his family, or perhaps 3 or 4 friends. But what intrigued the police in this case was finding a diary in Gonsalves' room. Within it were some sketches that further complicated this case. Actually, if these sketches are examined closely, it will be apparent that they tell the story of 2 sacrifices. In the first, a person is attempting to cut off an animal's head while wearing a suit. Meanwhile, in the second sacrifice, a man's head is being cut off with a saw. In addition to these, an attempt has been made to portray the SpongeBob cartoon character as a monster. Or on the other side of the page, a picture of a deer without a head has been drawn, and right next to it, only the head of a lion cub has been drawn. Furthermore, when the police went inside Gonsalves' house, they found a strange sign on a wall just behind the door, as if it were some sort of cult symbol. Now, what was even more surprising was that when the Mumbai police tried to recreate the crime scene with Gonsalves' dog, the startling thing was that Gonsalves' dog went straight to where Gonsalves' body was lying with a tree. After a while, his dog arrived at the spot where Gonsalves' body was found, just a few meters away. Among all the cases we've explained on this channel so far, this case was the weirdest, like how Gonsalves' dog somehow went to the places where his body was found. It's possible that when Gonsalves first went out for a walk with his dog on December 19th, he might have already gone to the place where his body was found. Another point is that the white Audi car following Gonsalves might have been known to him, and he might have gone with them willingly, sitting in the car. Additionally, it's possible that after returning home, Gonsalves took the bag with him, which might have contained items related to worship like coconut, padukas, etc. Because it's also being said on the internet that maybe Gonsalves sacrificed himself. Today, it's been over 7 years since this case, but the murderer of Brandon Gonsalves is still unknown. Meanwhile, Gonsalves' mother and sister have made numerous visits to the police station and the crime branch office to find out the status of their son Brandon Gonsalves' murder case. During this time, Gonsalves' mother and sister were afraid that the police might close Gonsalves' murder case. Due to this reason, Seema's elder daughter Kashma appealed to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the state's chief minister to seek justice. Well, if this case gets solved in the future, we will definitely update you through this channel's community post. But so far, this case remains unsolved. With this, Brandon Gonçalves' case also concludes here. Before moving forward, quickly subscribe to the channel. This is strange. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Quickly subscribe to it. Now we are jumped to the next story. This is the story of Madanapalli city in the state of Andhra Pradesh, India, which is Asia's largest tomato market. Besides, there are many mountains here as well. It was January 24th, 2021, around 8:30 p.m. on Sunday night in Madanapalli, when Dr. V. Purushotham Naidu, the head of the Naidu family, called his friend Raju and said on the phone, "Both my daughters are no longer in this world. Alekhya, 27, and Saidivya, 22, have both passed away, but there's nothing to worry about. Tomorrow morning, they will come back through reincarnation because the Kal Yuga is ending, and the Satyug will begin from tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Raju said to his friend Dr. Naidu, "Everything is normal at home? Speaking such language against your daughters doesn't suit you." In response, Dr. Naidu said, "No, Raju, I am telling the truth. In a while, both I and your sister-in-law will leave our bodies in Kal Yuga and be born again in Satyug." Upon hearing this, Dr. Naidu's friend Raju started feeling extremely restless. Consequently, he abruptly ended the call and within a few minutes arrived at Dr. Naidu's house. Raju reached there, knocked on the door, and just as the door was about to open, Dr. Naidu himself appeared, looking completely normal. But when Raju went inside and saw the scene there, his eyes widened in shock, because Dr. Naidu had spoken the truth. Lying on the ground in the prayer room of his house was the lifeless body of his 27-year-old daughter, Alekhya. She had completed her master's in Bhopal and now was preparing for the civil services. Her face was pale, and blood was oozing from various places. After this, Dr. Naidu took Raju to another room adjacent to the prayer room where the dead body of his 22-year-old daughter, Saidivya, lay on the ground. She had been struck with a trident of Lord Shiva on her forehead, and a small brass pot placed in the prayer room was inserted into her mouth. The clothes were removed from both bodies, and they were wrapped in red cloth. Additionally, their hair was partially cut, and they were placed in front of the statue of Lord Shiva in the temple. They had scattered many worship materials around the bodies. However, despite seeing the bodies of their daughters, there was no sign of tension or sorrow on the faces of Dr. Naidu and his wife Padmaja. This behavior of his friend and his wife seemed very strange to Raju. Therefore, he bids them goodbye and leaves their house. However, instead of going home, he goes straight to the police station and tells the police the whole story of how these educated parents sacrificed their daughters. He also informs them about the mental condition of Dr. Naidu and his wife. However, the police were having little belief in Raju's story after hearing this strange tale. Because for the past year, Dr. Naidu and his family, who had been living in the new house in Madanapalli, had earned quite a reputation in the city. Anyway, after that, the police station in charge, along with some officers, directly reached the Naidu family's house. When the police knocked on the door, once again it was Dr. Naidu who opened it. But seeing her husband's friend with him, Padmaja got very angry and started shouting at the police because they had once again disrupted their worship. Now, the argument between the police and the Naidu family had attracted neighbors from nearby. Now, as soon as the police entered the house and saw what was inside, they too were astonished. Later, after hearing Raju, the police realized that it was a case of superstition. Although Mr. and Mrs. Naidu repeatedly tried to convince the police that both their daughters would return to life before sunrise tomorrow, they were just saying that they only need a day's time, and tomorrow morning both our daughters will come back to life. Then you all will be surprised. But the police knew that both girls were dead, so how could they come back to life? Therefore, Mr. and Mrs. Naidu were first explained with great difficulty. But when they still didn't understand, the police showed some firmness and took both of them to the police station. Afterwards, a forensic team was called in to investigate the crime scene. The forensic team continued their examination for some time and then sent the bodies for post-mortem. Now, the police have started investigating both inside and outside the house. Here, the police learned from neighbors of the Naidu family that someone from the family used to go out daily to buy something, but for the past 3 days, no one has come out of the house, nor has anyone gone inside, not even the maid who used to clean the house, as these people did not even call her. After that, the police directly approached the maid, who told them that 3 days ago, she was told by the Naidus that we are going to perform a special worship in the house for 3 days, and until we call you, do not come to work at the house. On the other hand, upon checking both girls' social media profiles and bookshelves inside the house, the police found out that Alekia highly respects Indian philosopher Osho. On his social media posts, Osho's name appeared repeatedly, indicating that he was one of Alekia's favorite people. Additionally, beside Alekia's dead body, was a book by the spiritual guru Meher Baba. Besides, pictures of Sri Sai Baba, Meher Baba, and Osho were plastered all over their house. Furthermore, neighbors often heard prayers and tantric chants from their house, and several times they saw some swamis entering the house. On the other hand, what was surprising was that just a few days before the murder, Alekia posted twice on her Instagram. In one post, she wrote, "Work is done," and in the second post, "Shiva is coming." Well, only Dr. Naidu and Padmaja, who were present in the custody, could reveal the truth behind this. However, controlling Padmaja was proving to be extremely difficult for the police. But before the custody, when the police were taking both husband and wife for a COVID test, Padmaja started saying, "I am Shiva myself. Because of my body particles, COVID has spread everywhere. It did not come from China." After getting their COVID tests done, Dr. Naidu informed the police about his background. Actually, Dr. Naidu had a master's in philosophy and science. In addition, he had obtained a PhD and was currently a professor of chemistry at Government Degree College for Women, Nida Nepali. His wife, Padmaja, was a gold medalist in mathematics and had been teaching at the famous schools of Madanapal for nearly 23 years, including at Masterminds IIT Talent High School. Alongside, she also had a master's in science. Additionally, Alekia, 27, was a postgraduate from Bhopal and then an aspirant for civil services. Furthermore, Saidivya, a 22-year-old, was training at the A.R. Rahman Music Conservatory in Mumbai after completing her Bachelor of Business Administration course. However, due to the lockdown, both of them had to return home. You might also wonder why, with such educated family members, these individuals attempted suicide. You'll find the answer by the end of the video. Afterwards, Alekia picked up Lord Shiva's trident from the temple and thrust it into her sister Divya's forehead. Then a copper vessel was placed in her mouth. Following the death of her younger sister Divya, Alekia told her mother that now she had to kill her. As a result, Padmaja struck Alekia on the head with a dumbbell kept in the house. Consequently, Alekia also died shortly thereafter. After killing both their daughters, both the husband and wife wandered around their bodies for quite some time. Now, because of the insistence of the wife and daughter, it was Dr. Naidu's turn. Perhaps out of fear, he called his friend and told him the whole matter, and if he hadn't made that call, perhaps neither of them would be in this world today. However, due to this, Padmaja scolded her husband, Dr. Naidu, a lot, saying, "You are a coward. Because of you, our secret got out, and our daughters couldn't come back." After seeing all this, it was finalized in this case that due to mental illness, All these family members had planned this, and it was revealed from a psychiatrist's source that their entire family was dealing with a rare disorder called shared psychotic disorder. Actually, in this disorder, more than two people who are in close relationships have a similar way of thinking. And it's because of this disorder that Alakia and Saidivya are no longer in this world today. In this double murder case, Alakia had a Canadian friend who told the print media that he couldn't believe for many days that Alakia could do such a thing. After questioning on Monday evening, funeral of both these girls were performed, and permission for this was given only to Dr. Naidu, while the girl's mother, Padmaja, was not allowed to participate for some reasons. In my opinion, in this case, Saidivya and Dr. Purushottam Naidu seem innocent to me. Although if they hadn't fallen into the temptation of Alekia and Padmaja, perhaps this would have been a happy family today. So with this, the case comes to an end here. Friends, how did you like this combined cases? Do you want to see such combined cases in the future too? Please share your opinion in the comment box. If you appreciate our efforts, like and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cassandra Cantrell. Fear is a negative and unpleasant feeling. Would anyone want to experience it over and over again? Cassandra Cantrell and her twin brother Rob were the exception. As young children, they couldn't go a day without the scary stories they liked to tell each other in a room with the lights off. Rob was a natural storyteller, or at least he thought he was. Cassandra would scream at every story he told, and he, playing the brave though small man, would sprawl on his bed. They also watched the animated series Scooby-Doo together, and while watching it, they argued over which of the characters in the story would turn out to be a ghost or a vampire in disguise. Cassandra's intuitive guesses were often ahead of her brother, and then he was nervous. Their mother, Mary Smith, although she did not share the same passion as the twins, bought them books by Robert Wall to instill a love of reading in her children. A love for scary stories was not just a childhood hobby, but a lifelong passion that the brother and sister shared. They even collected figurines of villains, and as adults, seriously considered opening a themed store associated with this culture of horror. An interest in horror movies brought Cassandra to the set in 2004, where she got a cameo in a scary movie that, although it didn't become popular, still caused a storm of envy in Rob, and he started asking his sister to make a deal for him. Rob was very happy, but to play, albeit in an episodic role, he was not able to. The head of the cast in that movie was Colin Dudley, and on the set, between him and debuting actress Cassandra, flashed a spark. To make the first step, each of them did not dare, but that all changed during a corporate Halloween party. Cassandra dressed up as Velma from Scooby-Doo, and Colin dressed up as Alex from A Clockwork Orange. For Cassandra, the image of the cartoon character was just an image, but for Colin Dudley, it seemed to be something more. He walked around with a glass of milk all evening, looking at everyone with a glare just as his character did in the movie, and he also talked a lot of quotes from the book. For example, looking at Cassandra with delight, he said, "Beauty invariably caused my only desire to destroy it, for it did not fit at all into our ugly world." Cassandra thought it was a compliment, and they soon began dating, but their relationship didn't last long. Only a couple of months later, Colin found another actress, Rebecca, and started dating her, and later the couple started living together. On August 25, 2020, Cassandra Cantrell disappeared. She, without warning anyone, drove her car away from home in an unknown direction and did not answer phone calls. The police officers were very reluctant to take a report from her mother for a very long time, trying to calm the poor woman down and saying that sometimes children grow up and don't always warn their parents when they go out with friends. But Mary Smith was sure that something terrible had happened, and maybe if the lazy cops would finally start working, she would still have a chance to see her daughter alive. The search for Cassandra did not begin until 2 days later, and on the third day, The police found her car under a bridge, not in the most favorable area. Also, to add to the bad news, the car was unlocked and the keys were inside. It was impossible to understand what Cassandra was doing here. This place was considered a neighborhood of homeless people where, with frequent frequency, the police found their bodies killed in a domestic fight or died of an overdose of illegal drugs. The officers had to go around the neighborhood questioning a lot of homeless people who, at the sight of the police, tried to get away for a while, but it was all to no avail. None of them had seen Cassandra, and none of them knew when the car showed up there. It was hard to expect anything else from the residents who lived under the bridge and drank alcohol all day long. The detective involved in the search for Cassandra had requested her cell phone billing, as he was instructed to do, but from experience, he was sure it would get him nowhere, and so it did. The signal showed that the phone was in the nearest body of water to the bridge, which meant that the detectives would not be able to recover it and get the information they needed. Nevertheless, a team of divers began searching the coastal area, and before they did so, standing on the shore, they picked up rocks from the ground and threw them into the water, testing how far they could throw the phone. Cassandra's mother said that her missing daughter's phone case was decorated with rhinestones, which meant it would not be difficult to find. Indeed, the phone was soon found, but Cassandra's body was not in the water. This things was presented to her mother as good news, but the poor woman did not feel any better. She seemed to have gotten used to the idea that her daughter was dead, and the only thing she wanted was for her body to be found and for this nightmare of uncertainty to end. Cassandra, as it seemed to her mother, despite her already realized age, was not married and did not even meet anyone. It was understandable that she had gotten pregnant by a man, but Mary had no information about the father of the child. Although, again from the words of her mother, her daughter very often corresponded with someone and called, but the phone number of her interlocutor, for some reason, was not recorded in the daughter's book, and the mother, of course, did not remember the numbers. She just noticed that it is quite strange to communicate so often with a person and not write down his number. Cassandra could not keep their relationships in absolute secrecy, and there should be at least one friend with whom Cassandra shared her secrets, and especially if those secrets were related to pregnancy. Such a friend was found, and in a conversation with police officers, she revealed that Cassandra had rekindled her relationship with her former boyfriend, Colin Dudley. Yes, their past relationship in 2004 was short-lived, and besides, it's been 15 years since their breakup. It is strange in general that after so much time, they remembered each other. As it turned out, Colin himself came out to Cassandra, with whom he once worked on a movie set in 2014. He found Cassandra on Facebook, wrote some warm words, and confessed that just recently his father died, with whom his wife, Rebecca, had a difficult relationship, and so he had no one to share his grief with. Cassandra, purely because of friendly motives, decided to meet and talk to the ex-boyfriend to calm him down. But the friendly meeting turned into something more. Since 2014, Colin began to live literally on two families, where Cassandra was in the status of mistress. When the young woman found out that she was pregnant, she did not want to inform Colin Dudley because every time she wanted to admit it to him, she recalled their conversation, where Colin said that he absolutely did not want children and that he was very happy about Rebecca being infertile. The news that he might have a daughter or son could destroy a real family, and Cassandra didn't want to hurt her lover, so she kept the news a secret. Meanwhile, her belly was growing, and it was impossible to hide it under the oversized sweaters, and in order for Colin not to guess anything, Cassandra stopped seeing him. But she couldn't hide it for long, and if she lied about having another boyfriend, it would hurt Colin and cause them to break up. Cassandra decided that the bitter truth was better than a sweet lie, so she told Colin over the phone that she was expecting a child with him. Colin was silent for a while, and then he finally said that he was delighted to hear the news. It sounded very strange, but Cassandra concluded that Colin was genuinely pleased. The detective arrived at Colin's house, knocked on the door, and his wife opened it. Deciding that it wasn't quite ethical to talk about a missing mistress in the presence of Colin's legal wife, the detective introduced himself as an old friend of Dudley's. Colin came out immediately, shut the door behind him, and walked away from the house with the detective, though the latter hadn't even introduced himself yet. It was as if he had been waiting for this meeting. "Thank you for not making your credentials public in front of Rebecca. You're a man of honor, a true officer. My compliments to you," Colin spoke in short sentences. "I heard Cassandra is missing. It's weird, bloody weird. I can't even guess where. She might have gone. She told me she'd had a big fight with her brother and was really worried about it. I advised her to stop by and make up with him. I don't know if she listened to me or not." That Cassandra and Rob had been in a fight, the detective knew. Rob had told him about it himself. It was nothing serious, just a family misunderstanding. But nevertheless, Cassandra's twin brother had been very upset about it because the day she disappeared, Cassandra had called him and wanted to come and talk to him. But his proud brother had refused, and now he blamed himself for it. If his sister had come to see him that day, she wouldn't have disappeared. "You know, officer, I'm not the nicest person. I think you realize that. Dating my ex-girlfriend in secret from my wife and for such a long period of time. I'm sure I'll be punished for it in the next world, but the human heart doesn't decide who you fall in love with. In 2014, my father died. He literally hated Rebecca with all his soul, and the feeling was mutual, but he really liked Cassandra. He often remembered her, reproached me for the fact that we broke up with her almost immediately after Christmas. We often fight with our parents, accusing them of not understanding, and then it turns out that it's us, their children, who don't understand, and it hurts. My father was right, of course, and after he died I just wanted to fulfill one of his wishes, and so I resumed my relationship with Cassandra. Rebecca needed to be broken up with. It was a conversation I kept putting off, you know. This family stuff sucks you dry, so I kept stalling. I've been living a double life for 5 years. It was hell. I had to make excuses for coming home late all the time to hide it. I'd tell her about some fictitious business trips and even bought a fishing rod, even though I hated fishing, a stupid pastime. And I'd tell Rebecca I was going to the lake while I went to Cassandra's before coming home. I'd buy fish at the supermarket for extra convincing, and Rebecca would bake it in the oven, and I'd eat it, even though the smell of fish makes me sick. The detective said, "Did you know Cassandra was pregnant?" Dudley replied in surprise, "Pregnant by whom?" The detective then explained, "I don't have that information, but she told a close friend of hers that it was from you." Dudley affirmed that. "That can't be true. She's been adamantly refusing to see him lately, and he understand her and can't blame her for that. Naturally, she was tired of being in the background and wanted a family, which unfortunately he couldn't give her. He guessed that the reason she refused to see him was because she had found someone else." The detective asked Colin when he last saw Cassandra. Colin claimed that the last time he saw her was about 3 or 4 months ago. This was not Colin's last encounter with the detective. Even though Cassandra's phone, which was lifted from the bottom of the pond and could not be recovered, the police requested the details of the calls of the missing person, and it turned out that most likely the unsigned number about which her mother told her belongs to Colin Dudley. Most often, Cassandra called him, and even on the day of her disappearance, they called each other. In addition, on that day, the police received CCTV footage from the train station near the bridge where Cassandra's abandoned car had been found, and on it they saw a strange man who stood out in the crowd of passengers on the platform. He wore a long cloak, gloves, his face was hidden in a scarf, and a hat was placed on his head, the sides of which covered his eyes. It was impossible to make out the face, but the detective said that the man's gait reminded him very much of Colin Dudley. As for the hat, it was almost identical to the one worn by Alex from A Clockwork Orange. After continuing to follow the strange man through the CCTV cameras, The detectives noticed that he literally went into the cafe for a few minutes, then came out of there and went towards the parking lot where he got into his car and drove away. During all this time, the stranger never showed his face, but they could see the license plate number of the car in which the stranger got into, and the car belonged to Colin Dudley. A unit was sent to his house with a search warrant. The detectives had initially believed that Cassandra was alive and in the basement of Dudley's house. At first, there was no evidence of a murder at Colin's house. However, in the closet, they found the very hat that Colin was trying to cover himself with. They then went down to the basement, but Cassandra was not there, nor was there any evidence of the crime. However, the service dog, trained to search by the scent of blood, barked as it sniffed the couch, which was already a very alarming sign. Colin assured the police that he had done nothing illegal and that they simply had no evidence and no other suspects, so they were trying to pin the crime on him, an innocent man. The detective interviewed his wife, who was shocked at what was going on in their home, the accusations against her husband, and the fact that she had been deceived for years. When the detective asked her if her husband was capable of murder, she answered in the negative after thinking about it for a long time. The evidence found against Colin was not enough to put him in jail, which made Rob and Mary Smith very angry. The detective was just throwing up his hands. Colin was called in for questioning again, and he thought carefully about the crime, as he had an alibi for all the allegations on the morning of August 25th at 6:30 a.m. Colin visited a hardware store where he purchased household cleaning chemicals and trash bags, and the store's cameras confirmed this. However, the large trash bags overshadowed this situation. Colin then received a text message from Cassandra that she was almost at his house, but he immediately deleted the message. But it remained in the cell phone carrier's memory, and the police got it from the call and message dump. Also, according to their cell phone billing, the couple did not leave the house that morning for several hours. Colin then turned off his phone but left his mistress's phone on, most likely by accident, and the police saw the entire path of his movements, including where he was seen on the station's CCTV cameras. As the police already knew, after the cafe where he was probably recovering from the murder by washing up in the toilet, Colin got into his car and drove to the pond where he had dumped Cassandra's phone, where the last signal from the cell phone had been received. It was now necessary to search for Cassandra's body, and the police, in order to accurately track the route, seized a GPS tracker from Colin's car. The device completely replicated the movement of Cassandra's cell phone signal, but there was new evidence in the case based on his movements. The next day, the cops retraced his path that went through the woods, and there, in a ravine, they spotted a huge trash can tied with ropes. All the ground around it was covered in blood, and it became clear what was in the container. By then, it had been a month since the murder, and identifying the body was difficult. The police were helped by Cassandra's tattoo, which was described in the search notes. Colin was apprehended the same day and charged with murder. Forensics conducted a forensic examination and indicated that death was caused by a fractured skull due to blunt force trauma. During the examination of the basement of the Dudley house, the police found traces of blood that could not be completely cleaned. Rebecca knew nothing about the murder, as she spent all day in another part of the house, from which no noise in the basement could be heard. She also confirmed that Colin never wanted children, and his story about her infertility was just a fiction, which the police took as a motive for the crime. During the trial, due to the lack of witnesses and physical evidence, such as the murder weapon, it was impossible to convince the jury that the murder was committed by Colin Dudley. Then the court made a deal with the killer that if he pleaded guilty, he would get a lesser sentence. Colin was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Cassandra's mother and her brother, who still felt guilty that he had not agreed to meet with his sister before her death, were very upset because the killer would most likely live to see the moment when he could go free. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Stephen Freeman. The victim, Stephen Andrew Freeman, was born on January 1, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up as happy, healthy children without any problems with their parents or society. Kind and responsive, Stephen had many friends, and everyone described him as an exceptionally calm and balanced person. Stephen grew up in Griffin, where he later attended Spalding High School and Gordon State College to complete his education. Mary Catherine Higdon was also raised in a respectable family, somewhat carefree, impetuous, humorous, and friendly. She was drawn to creativity. She often put on mini plays and performed them in front of her family and neighbors. Mary and Stephen fell in love with each other in their senior years and have been inseparable since. The young couple had a lot of common interests. Both loved being in nature. They went hiking, fishing, and even hunting together. In 2012, Stephen Freeman updated his Facebook status to indicate he was in a relationship and regularly shared various photos with his partner. Mary's family was fond of her boyfriend, and Steve's parents also accepted his girlfriend as their own daughter. After graduating from school, the young couple moved in together. Stephen got a job as a plumber at Drain W Gutters and Roofing Inc., and Mary Catherine worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School. She also worked part-time as a sales associate at a gun store. By the summer of 2018, Stephen and Mary had been living together for 7 years but had not gotten married. On August 1st, 2018 at 10:42 p.m., emergency services received an alarm call. The caller, 24-year-old Mary Catherine Higdon, screamed hysterically into the phone that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend. She reported grabbing a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that there was a bullet in the chamber. When paramedics and police arrived at Sunnybrook Drive, she was in a state of shock. She knelt in front of the motionless and bloodied body of the young man lying on the bed, crying incessantly, gasping and begging the doctors to help him. "I can't lose him. I can't lose him," she cried. Law enforcement officers struggled to pull Mary Catherine away from the victim to examine him and provide first aid. 23-year-old Stephen Freeman, wounded in the chest just below the neck, was still breathing. He was immediately transported to Spalding Regional Hospital. Unfortunately, a few minutes before midnight, the young man's heart stopped. Not fully comprehending the tragedy that had occurred and still in shock, Mary had to visit the police station to give her account of the events. She was called in for questioning, where she, still completely stunned, claimed that the shot was accidental. She explained that there had always been firearms in their home, and that Stephen would leave a pistol on the nightstand for self-defense before going to sleep, as their house was located outside the city. On that fateful evening, she merely wanted to hand Stephen the pistol, and it accidentally discharged. She had no idea the gun was loaded. Mary Catherine insisted that Stephen Freeman was the love of her life, and she would never harm him, especially not intentionally. Examining the scene, investigators did not rule out the possibility that the act might have been premeditated, and they had substantial arguments to support this theory. There were signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered about. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story improbable and continued the investigation, examining the evidence. Mary Catherine was called in for a second interrogation, where the investigators used aggressive tactics. They yelled at her, expressed skepticism about her account, and demanded the truth. This approach was effective, and Mary Catherine confessed to shooting her boyfriend in a fit of anger. She explained that they had a heated argument, and she wanted to leave him. The investigators had recorded the conversation and obtained a confession, indicating a case that had been resolved. However, a significant technical issue arose, resulting in the loss of most of the recording, with only background interference and indistinct noises remaining. The reason for this loss and the lack of a backup copy of this crucial evidence remained unexplained. Further investigation revealed that the pistol could not have been fired accidentally, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. Additionally, for the bullet to have struck Stephen in the way it did, the pistol had to have been pointed directly at the victim. Detectives also closely examined Mary's behavior, with some suspecting that she may have been overacting and exaggerating her distress. The detectives remained diligent, carefully piecing together their theory of the tragedy based on the emerging evidence and proof. Another critical fact cast doubt on the accident in Mary Catherine's words. Investigators learned that she worked at a gun store, where employees undergo thorough training on handling various firearms before starting work. This meant she undoubtedly knew how to safely hand over a pistol without causing harm. The picture of an accident didn't align with the new facts that the investigation uncovered. She changed her statement several times, and her hysterical state sometimes interrupted the interrogation. However, she reiterated that it was an accident. In another conversation, Mary Catherine told the police that at Stephen's request, she tossed the pistol to hand it to him, and the weapon accidentally discharged. This did not match what she had told the investigators at the scene and during the first interrogation, where she repeatedly stated that she was simply handing Stephen the pistol hand to hand, not tossing it, and that's when it accidentally fired below his neck. These changing statements worked against Mary Catherine as she was caught lying, and every word was scrutinized for hidden intent, indicating guilt or concealment. Mary was detained and held in the Spalding County Jail during her trial. She was charged with felony murder, malice murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm while committing a crime. Lieutenant Wilson strongly disputed Mary's claim that it was an accident and tried to prove that her actions were a deliberate and meticulously planned act. A new piece of evidence in this case was common cooking grease found on the slide of the pistol. The slide also had lubricant, suggesting that at some point, the magazine must have been emptied, bullets were loaded, and the pistol was then placed on a shelf. In her defense, Mary Catherine told the police that she was indeed preparing dinner for Stephen that evening, and the dinner found scattered on the kitchen floor explained the presence of grease on the slide. Subsequent interrogations of the couple's relatives and friends did not provide the clarity expected in this case. Many friends claimed that this teenage love turned into a roller coaster ride for Stephen and Mary, until their relationship nearly ended and then reignited with new passion. It became genuinely complicated in recent years. The lovers often argued over emerging disagreements. Mary turned every argument into a dramatic event, screaming at Stephen and attacking him, after which he often left the house to spend the night with friends, turning off his phone as Mary continued to call and text him. She tried to control his every move, driving Stephen to frustration. The guy shared with friends that during arguments and fights, Mary pointed a pistol at him or herself, threatening to end her life or his. Stephen never reported this to the police, fearing Mary would be jailed. And this was not the only instance when Mary resorted to using a weapon. There were plenty of weapons in their home. During an interrogation, Stephen's friend Thomas Skinner shared that 2 days before the tragedy on July 30th, 2018, Stephen and Mary Catherine exchanged warm messages, wishing each other a good day. The next day, July 31st, Stephen told his mother that he would not return home to that devil, and stayed the night at Thomas's place. On August 1st, 2018, when Stephen didn't come home to sleep, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. That evening, she prepared dinner and waited for her beloved. From Stephen's mother, she learned he was at his friend Thomas's place and went to pick him up. She encountered them on the road and, rolling down the window, shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen replied that he was coming home. The evening, instead of a reconciliatory dinner, ended in tragedy. The police believed the case was closed as a premeditated act driven by Mary Catherine's anger. However, her defense team revealed another side to the young couple's life known to few. On June 17, 2019, almost a year after Stephen's death, his beloved Mary Catherine Higdon stood trial. Before the hearing, Mary Higdon was offered a plea deal for life imprisonment with the possibility of parole if she pleaded guilty. However, she refused the deal, insisting she could never harm Stephen because he was the love of her life. At the initial hearings, Mary Higdon defended herself vehemently, repeatedly claiming it was an accident and that she loved Stephen Freeman. She also surprised many by accusing her boyfriend of abusive behavior towards her, claiming he hit her twice and even forced himself on her on the day of the tragedy, and she had to defend herself. It turned out the couple's relationship had been deteriorating over some time. Friends and relatives claimed Mary Higdon was furious because Stephen often ignored her messages and calls. She demanded attention and pursued him, especially insistently lately. Allegedly, on the night of the incident, when Stephen Freeman finally came home, he refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared for him, which became the last straw for her. She couldn't hold back and shot at him. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard stated in court that physical evidence supported the claim that Mary Catherine shot Stephen in anger after he didn't come home for dinner and ignored her calls and text messages. The evidence presented included the grease found on the pistol and the sheet taken from the mattress where Stephen lay bleeding. The sheet was shown as a key piece of evidence, indicating that Stephen was not attacking Mary but was sitting still in one spot. Forensic experts examined the blood stains and determined that at the moment of the shot, Stephen was not moving or approaching Mary Catherine, but was calmly sitting on the bed. If he had been moving, the blood would have been everywhere, not just in one corner of the sheet. This only confirmed that the accused's theory was once again false. In court, faced directly with the possibility of life imprisonment, and finally believing in the gravity of the situation, Mary Catherine made the risky decision to provide truthful testimony. With tears in her eyes, in front of the judge and numerous attendees, she once again portrayed Stephen Freeman as a harsh and controlling tyrant and presented specific evidence. She managed to do so, and the defense stuck to the self-defense narrative. They presented the argument that a scandal had erupted between Mary and Stephen on the evening of the tragedy, where Mary fired at him in self-defense. Mary Catherine sorrowfully shared numerous stories from her life, where Stephen had hurt her. She confessed he had repeatedly hit her face, shaken her, and threatened punishment for any minor misconduct or disobedience. Living with Stephen, she experienced all kinds of imaginable pressure: verbal insults, physical attacks, and even assault. He constantly controlled and manipulated her, needing to know where she was, who she was with, what she was doing, how she was spending money, and even what she was eating. He drove her to despair with unreasonable jealousy. She never reported him to the police because she loved and feared him. The defense presented ample evidence to support their claims. This included not just text messages taken from Mary's old phone, but also correspondence that raised significant questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in this relationship. The text messages, dating back over a year and a half between Mary and Stephen, not only proved Stephen's harsh behavior towards Mary Catherine, but also Mary's infidelity. Some message excerpts showed Stephen insulting Mary Catherine with harsh words and threatening her with repercussions upon his return from fishing. However, the reason for his anger was that, as confirmed by his friends, he was very angry with his girlfriend for being unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Catherine shared that Stephen had sexually assaulted her twice, and she feared he would harm her again on August 1, 2018, leading her to act in self-defense. The defense called an expert witness and close relatives of Mary who could attest to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, testified affirmatively, stating she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting. She expressed regret for not photographing the injuries and believing Mary's explanation that it happened accidentally. A tearful Mary Higdon explained to the jury that on the night of the incident, she decided to break up with Stephen, telling him to leave the house. Stephen became angry and attacked her, and in self-defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand and accidentally fired. After Mary Catherine's emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense engaged in a fierce battle with Stephen's former friends who had been close to Mary for years. desperately trying to idealize their deceased friend. Thomas Skinner, Stephen's best friend, described the victim as a loyal and hard-working country boy, while portraying Mary Catherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. He claimed that over the last few years, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship had become toxic, with her threatening to end her life whenever Stephen tried to leave her, and on one occasion, pointing a pistol at her head in front of him. Another witness, Stephen's co-worker Alicia Varela, testified that Mary Catherine would obsessively call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. In Mary's supposedly truthful court testimony, where she framed the shooting as self-defense, she omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard pointed out. Mary extensively discussed their troubled relationship and how, after years of harmony, it had deteriorated into physical abuse. However, she never mentioned the moment when she pulled the trigger in supposed self-defense. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard remained unconvinced by Mary's account, noting that during cross-examination, Mary never once mentioned any harsh treatment by Stephen. Repeatedly, the prosecutor asked Mary Catherine whether a woman feeling safe at home would pursue her assailant late at night to bring him back. The answer was unsatisfactory, and the prosecutor continued, vividly describing the accidental shooting. Kate Lenhard picked up the pistol and recreated the scene as she envisioned it. According to her theory, Stephen came home, and after hearing Mary out, they argued, and he refused to have dinner. Enraged, Mary scattered the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen, trying to avoid further conflict, went to the bedroom and sat on the bed, likely waiting for her to calm down. But Mary, ready for confrontation, called out to him twice without receiving a response, walked into the bedroom, and shot him in the neck on the left side. Since he hadn't turned to face her in her closing arguments, Kate Lenhard reminded the jury of the various stories and versions that kept changing at every police interrogation and court hearing. Mary Catherine Higdon spared no details in her emotional testimony about the alleged abuse from Stephen Freeman. But before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard desperately pleaded to consider this story not as a case of self-defense, but as a case of extreme manipulation. Despite the lost confession recording, the prosecution presented other evidence and counter-arguments. The forensic examination proved that Stephen Freeman was sitting on the bed at the moment of the shooting, hence he couldn't have been attacking Mary Higdon. Mary claimed they kept the gun in the house unloaded, but detectives suspected that the pistol was indeed loaded in advance on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Stephen. This was the only explanation for how grease marks not only got on part of the slide but also inside the pistol. Did Mary Catherine really load the pistol in advance? Colleagues, neighbors, family, friends, and acquaintances of Stephen Freeman unanimously testified that he was not prone to aggression. Prosecutors also pointed out that Mary Catherine Higdon changed details of her story at least 10 times since the first interrogation, attributing such changes to fear. Mary Catherine refused a plea deal as she could have been facing the death penalty. The wait for the verdict felt like an eternity to her. After hearing all witnesses and the accused, the case was handed over to the jury. Just 10 minutes later, the jury was ready to announce their decision. However, 2 jurors out of 10 had doubts about some aspects of the prosecution's story. They were concerned that investigators, so eager to charge Mary Catherine with premeditated action, had not fully checked crucial facts. Questions were raised about the lack of a complete investigation into Stephen Freeman's phone, checking his text messages and browsing history. The prosecution simply hadn't done this. Besides Mary's lies, no sufficient evidence was presented against her. The arguments presented by jurors Victor and Chris had an effect. The jury deliberated and returned a unanimous verdict, not guilty. A few hours later, Mary Catherine Higdon was free. After a lengthy deliberation, the 12 jurors concluded the following. The defendant was found not guilty on the first charge of malicious action and not guilty on the second charge of serious action. When the judge acquitted Mary Catherine Higdon on all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime. Many people in the courtroom were shocked, watching the person who took her son's life walk out of the courtroom. Jennifer Freeman could barely contain her anger towards the jurors, and everyone who supported Stephen's family was also stunned by such a verdict. After the trial ended in her favor, Mary Catherine returned home to be with her family in Griffin. Since then, she has stayed out of the limelight and is almost absent from social media, likely to avoid undue attention from the media and the public. Her Instagram profile is private, and no further details about her current whereabouts are known. It's assumed that Mary Catherine has moved on from her harrowing past to live a quiet and unnoticeable life. Stephen Freeman's mother dedicated a farewell post to her son on social media. Stephen lived a life filled with love, joy, compassion, and loyalty. Everyone was his friend, and those who enjoyed hunting and fishing with him were his closest. He had a heart of gold and a charming southern smile. Stephen showed his love for you by making you feel like you were the only person in the world, making you laugh until your stomach hurt, always smiling broadly, hugging you, and never leaving your side. These 3 simple words, "I love you," have always inspired me. So who really pulled the trigger in this story? That's a question you must answer for yourself, as all the answers in this story are evident by analyzing and presenting the situation. It's up to everyone to decide whether Mary Catherine is guilty or if it was a tragic accident that cost a young man his life. How much do you agree with the 2 jurors who changed the course of a young woman's life, giving her a second chance? Mary Catherine likely lives a quiet life away from the spotlight now that she has managed to leave her terrible past behind. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In a heart-wrenching tale of tragedy, we meet Eva Blanco Puig, a young soul taken too soon at just 16 years old. For 18 agonizing years, her story remained shrouded in darkness until the truth, once elusive, finally surfaced through DNA samples, unmasking the face of the perpetrator. For 18 long years, the questions haunted those who loved her. Who could do such a thing? Why was justice so elusive? But the memory of Eva's radiant spirit never faded, as it was for Eva etched in the hearts of those she left behind. And thus, the relentless pursuit of justice for their loved one never ceased. Eva Blanco Puig was born on February 17, 1981, in Spain to Manuel Blanco and Olga Puig. By 1997, the couple was living a quiet and peaceful life, having already settled in Aldehuela, a small municipality of Madrid that was well away from all the bustle of the capital, together with their 3 daughters, Eva, Rebecca, and Maria. Eva, among her closest companions and beloved kin, was often portrayed as a rather quiet girl yet exuded an enchanting air of mirth and dependability, and was an absolute delight to be around. She also thrived in the realm of athletic pursuits, with her passion for sports illuminating her days with unbridled joy. At school, she found herself embraced by a multitude of admirers for her magnetic charisma and warm-hearted nature that knew no bounds. Eva always set a good example for her younger sisters, and being a responsible girl, she did not give her parents great displeasure as she complied with all the rules that they dictated, with one of them being the curfew that they had always set for her. However, on this fateful day, things did not go as planned. On the afternoon of April 19th, Eva and her friends were playing tennis, enjoying the carefree moments that only youth could offer. But little did they know that this seemingly ordinary afternoon would take a dark and harrowing turn. As the sun dipped below the horizon, being a Saturday, they decided to go to a local disco to cherish their unbreakable bonds of friendship and spend more time with each other, extending it into the late night. Eva had already asked her mother for permission to extend her curfew slightly, and Olga, seeing that her daughter had always been responsible, rewarded her as they agreed that by midnight she should already be back home. The clock struck 11:30 p.m., and little by little, the group bid their farewells, heading home. Among them was Blanco, whose journey home would unfortunately lead her into the shadows of mystery. Accompanied by her friend, Eva ventured towards a vacant lot that served as a shortcut to her home. It was a path she had walked countless times before, but destiny had something else in store for her. At around 11:45 p.m., they parted ways as Blanco took her familiar path through the dark, vacant lot, with no inkling that it would be their last goodbye. As midnight approached, Eva's mother grew restless, her heart burdening with worry as her daughter failed to arrive home. She reached out to Eva's friends, hoping for any clue to her whereabouts, only to be told that everyone had already parted ways, and Eva should have already arrived at home by then. This rang her alarm bells as she alerted her husband, who was a tow truck driver. He then began searching for Eva in the town, together with his nephew, a local police officer, and also with the help of the father of one of Eva's friends. When the clock struck 1 a.m., Blanco's parents reported her disappearance at the local civil guard station. But to their dismay, the officers showed little concern for filing a disappearance report for someone missing just a little over an hour. The guard at the door callously dismissed the seriousness of the situation, claiming that children of her age were all on drugs, and she was probably lying in a doorway or on some sidewalk, clearly implying she was not worth that much attention to them. In the darkness of the night, Blanco's father made a harrowing journey to the local civil guard station up to 15 times. With frustration in his heart, he criticized the institution for their lack of urgency in searching rural roads or utilizing vehicles before sunrise. He accused them of neglect, citing a shortage of gas as their excuse. But the civil guards refuted his claims, defending their customary practice of waiting for a few hours to pass before initiating a search after a missing person report. A father's plea for his daughter's safe return hung in the balance as the truth behind the delay remained shrouded in doubt and despair. As the night deepened, the frantic search for Blanco commenced at 2:30 a.m. Her family, friends, and authorities scoured the streets of the town and the surrounding area, but the civil guard had not yet filed an official missing person report. A missing report was filed at 8 a.m., and the decision to publicize the case was made at noon. Blanco's family reached out to the regional TV station Telemadrid, imploring them for help. At 9 a.m., Eva's lifeless body had been discovered by two elderly residents, 6 kilometers away from Algueta, near a road construction site between Cobeña and Belvis de Jarama. The area was known to be frequented by young couples seeking privacy inside their cars. Initially, a dreadful accident was suspected, with the possibility that she might have been run over by a car. However, when the civil guard arrived, the horrifying truth emerged. Blanco, lying face down on the ground, had been mercilessly stabbed multiple times while desperately trying to escape her assailant. The clothes she wore on the day of her disappearance, a pair of jeans, a dark sweater, and mountain boots, clung to her lifeless form, with only one sleeve of her jacket missing, hinting at a sinister struggle. The investigators believed that both Blanco and her killer had arrived at the scene in a vehicle, but heavy rain during the night had erased any tire tracks or crucial forensic evidence. Despite the challenging circumstances, the investigators discovered faint footprints from Blanco and a foreboding clue of footprints of a man wearing size 42 moccasins, providing a faint glimmer of hope in their pursuit of justice for the innocent soul lost. The civil guard notified Blanco's family of the discovery at 3:30 p.m. The news caused commotion in the town of just 12,300 people at the time, with no recent instances of violent crime. At around 7 p.m., 200 people gathered silently before Blanco's home to condemn her murder. Her funeral was held on the 23rd of April and was attended by 2,000 people. In a devastating revelation from the autopsy report, Eva endured a horrifying fate, suffering 19 stab wounds to her back, leading to her tragic demise due to blood loss around 4 a.m. The murder weapon, a Navaja-style knife between 8 and 10 centimeters long and 1 centimeter wide, became a terrifying instrument of her torment. The first stab occurred while she was still in a vehicle, while the subsequent ones followed as she desperately tried to run up a slope beside the road. Many of the wounds, particularly those on her ear and the back of her head, were distressingly deemed passionate in nature, adding to the brutality of the crime. Among the horrifying details, the first injury stood out, deep and potentially fatal, even without the additional wounds inflicted later. The tragedy did not end there, as the evidence revealed the heartbreaking violation of Blanco's innocence. The presence of the same man's bodily fluid was discovered in her mouth, genitals, and underwear, testimony to a heinous act that defies comprehension. The discovery of a red fiber in her mouth, identified as common car upholstery by the Catalonia Textile Museum and Documentation Center, confirmed that Blanco had been in a vehicle after her abduction. These shocking details painted a heart-rending picture of the unspeakable pain and suffering endured by this innocent soul in her final moments. Due to the body being found dressed and showing no apparent signs of violence, both the coroner and officers initially speculated that the sexual encounter may have been consensual, leading to a fatal altercation afterward. In stark contrast, Eva's grieving parents firmly believed that their daughter had been abducted, sexually assaulted at knife point, and then murdered to prevent her from seeking justice for the heinous act. The Civil Guard anticipated that the case would be closed after a short investigation, with their prevailing theory pointing towards a single individual known to Blanco. Allegedly, this person approached her in a car, offering a ride that she accepted, leading them to the secluded construction site, a well-known lover's lane, where the tragic events unfolded. Blanco's ex-boyfriend, residing in Fuente El Saz, who had recently separated from her, became an initial suspect, but he was cleared following police questioning. Subsequently, the focus of the investigation shifted towards adult men known to Blanco's family, individuals that she might have trusted to board their vehicle. As the investigation progressed, the case proved to be more intricate than initially thought, and the likelihood of a stranger's involvement could not be ruled out. Blanco's close acquaintances vehemently maintained that she would never willingly enter a vehicle with someone she did not know, leading them to believe that she had been coerced into the car under duress. Further complicating matters, several residents connected the incident to a suspicious blue vehicle observed in the area at around 12 a.m. One of the car's occupants was described as a fair-haired male, estimated to be roughly 20 years of age. Unfortunately, nobody thought to write down the car's license plate number, which could have been an essential piece of evidence in the investigation. The discovery of an unidentified male bodily fluid on the young woman's body and clothes during the investigation was concealed from Blanco's family and the public, as the officers secretly collected DNA samples from her male relatives and acquaintances to compare with the fluid's DNA. Eva's father's sample was obtained from a discarded cigarette he smoked while drinking coffee and discussing the case with the Civil Guard officers, while others were surreptitiously taken during unrelated blood alcohol content tests or from the cups and glasses they used in bars. Despite not finding any matches, the Civil Guard remained steadfast in their belief that the perpetrator was an adult male residing in Al Hit, or a nearby town. The pursuit of justice continued in the shadows while the heartbroken family yearned for answers that instead created more questions. 8 months after the tragic incident, Blanco's mother found in her daughter's room 2 hidden notebooks that were labeled 95 to 96 and 96 to 97. Within these pages, Blanco had meticulously chronicled her daily experiences until the day of her murder. The entries predominantly featured the names Eva and Miguel, referring to her ex-boyfriend, written repeatedly in various pen colors. However, just 2 pages before the final one, the names Eva and Miguel were replaced with Eva and 34310. Despite numerous efforts to decipher the significance of the number, all attempts proved futile. Speculations surrounding the number range from it being related to the phone code of Spain, which is 34, and the postal code of the town, which is 110, to yet again being associated with a pager number from a Coca-Cola promotion. At that time, the mystery of the number remained unsolved, leaving Blanco's loved ones and investigators haunted by the enigmatic clue. Upon learning that his DNA had been compared to the fluids found in his daughter's body and that he had been excluded as a suspect, Blanco's father initiated a campaign to rally other residents of Alhiti for voluntary DNA samples to aid in apprehending his daughter's killer. With the support of Mayor Jesus Herrera Fernandez, an official announcement was made in November 1999, urging all male residents over 16 years old, estimated to be 5,000 individuals, to voluntarily provide their hair or saliva samples. However, Spanish judicial organizations unanimously rejected the proposition, deeming it simple-minded, disproportionate, useless, and potentially stigmatizing for those who chose not to provide their DNA without a court order, which was their legal right to do so. They also believed that the culprit would obviously not volunteer to provide their sample. Nevertheless, Blanco's father managed to collect 2,013 samples from the residents of Alhet and nearby towns, depositing them at the local courthouse until further decisions were made. The examining magistrate of the case sought a report from Madrid's chief prosecutor to assess the legal feasibility of such tests. The response that was issued on March 30, 2000, emphasized that testing should be limited to individuals who could be considered suspicious based on the investigation rather than merely volunteers. Consequently, only samples from 45 people were tested, including 12 relatives from Eva's father's and mother's sides, her acquaintances, and individuals with a prior criminal record, with a particular focus on cases involving sexual misconduct and knife violence. The search for justice persisted amidst the legal complexities and the never-ending determination of those who sought the truth behind Eva's tragic fate. Despite the case hitting a standstill, the homicide group of the Civil Guard remained resolute, never allowing it to fade into oblivion. Over the years, each new member and commander took it upon themselves to revisit the case file, hoping to bring a fresh perspective. The investigation expanded beyond borders, with information sought from various law enforcement agencies, including the Ertzaintza and the FBI. A DNA specialist from the University of Santiago de Compostela re-examined the evidence, revealing that the DNA belonged to a man of non-European descent. Over the years, the number of individuals investigated soared to 1,503, including 208 men from Alget and neighboring towns who voluntarily underwent DNA testing, even encompassing criminals on leave during the time of the murder. A new examining magistrate allowed the opening and checking of the 2013 envelopes containing the names of the volunteers from 1999, but not the testing of all DNA samples. La Sexta's investigative show, La Sexta Columna, aired an episode about the case titled Eva, a Cold Case, on April 26, 2013, that featured interviews with Blanco's loved ones and experts. Psychologist and criminologist Vicente Garrido proposed the theory of a stalker as the likely perpetrator, challenging the Civil Guard's secret boyfriend hypothesis. The lack of defensive wounds suggested threats, and the criminal could be of low intelligence, uneducated, and emotionally immature, given that he was seeking intimacy with a teenager instead of a woman his age. He might have had no family, as they would have noticed his late-night activities, and the possibility of him continuing his crimes elsewhere or being in prison for other attacks was considered. Following the program's broadcast, a woman came forward to authorities reporting that she had seen a suspicious man at the road construction site around 8 a.m. before Eva's body had been found. The man appeared disheveled, walking in the rain without an umbrella, looking like he hadn't slept through the night, and was searching for something before getting into a white Renault 18. The Civil Guard considered her testimony reliable, as other witnesses had also reported a Renault 18 over the years, which matched the fiber found on Blanco's body. On October 28, 2013, a facial composite of the suspect, made in collaboration with the new witness, was released. The man was described to be between 35 and 40 years old in 1997, around 1.7 to 1.8 meters tall, corpulent with his weight between 75 to 80 kilograms, with short, spiky brown hair, a square and hardened face, and dark, sunken eyes. He was said to be dressed in a white shirt and a V-neck sweater, and he drove a white Renault 18 with red upholstery. To gather clues, a confidential phone number and email address were set up, resulting in 100 emails received by January 1, 2014. By the end of 2013, a breakthrough in the investigation revealed that the DNA from the fluids pointed to a man of North African descent. The Civil Guard petitioned the 300 North African men who lived in Algete in 1997 for voluntary samples. A former neighbor of Blanco's, now residing in southern France, shared a remarkable genetic match with the killer, indicating a possible sibling relationship. Further analysis of a brother living in Murcia, who had never lived in Algete, yielded an identical match, leading to a European arrest warrant for the third brother, Ahmed Chel Gersh. On October 1, 2015, Ahmed was apprehended outside his workplace in Villeurbanne, France, in a joint operation involving the Civil Guard and the French Gendarmerie. Ahmed Chel Gersh, born on March 1, 1963, in Taza, Morocco, was 34 years old at the time of the murder. He married a 20-year-old Spanish woman in Madrid in 1989 and obtained Spanish citizenship in the 1990s. They went on to have children, and at the time of Blanco's murder, Chel's wife was 5 months pregnant. They never appeared as residents of Algete since they lived in a caravan provided by Chel's employer at a plant nursery where he worked as a delivery man. Their residence, located next to the Puente del Retamar road, was approximately 4 kilometers away from the crime scene. In 1999, the Chel family moved to France, where, although they continued to be listed as married in Spain, they had separated amicably. Chel remarried to a 24-year-old Moroccan student in Villeurbanne in 2003, settling in a village approximately 20 kilometers from the Swiss border, and went on to have children as well. In France, he worked as a welder for a farm machinery company, but his relationship with co-workers was reportedly troubled. When confronted with the DNA evidence, Chel claimed that 2 unidentified men brought him to Blanco's body and forced him to touch himself over her body. However, his ex-wife contradicted this account by informing journalists that Ahmed had actually gone out with his brothers, as they often did during the weekends. She revealed that one of the brothers had disclosed that they were at the same disco as Blanco and had spoken to her after she argued with her ex-boyfriend. While Blanco initially left the disco with the brothers, she returned inside with her friends around 11 p.m. Surprisingly, Chel's ex-wife stated that neither she nor the brothers had ever been interrogated by the police or the Civil Guard during the investigation. While she denied any mistreatment by Chel, she later admitted to his aggressive behavior when under the influence of alcohol. Descriptions from former co-workers and female customers portrayed him as unsociable, aggressive when drunk, and inappropriate towards women. Blanco's family had minimal interaction with Chel's brothers at most, and had never even met Chel himself. On October 5, 2015, Chel attempted to harm himself in his cell, but agreed to be deported to Spain for trial 2 days later. At the preliminary hearing on October 13, he declined to make a statement, but provided a DNA sample. Charged with murder, sexual assault, and illegal detention, he was held in Soto del Rio prison pending trial as the DNA testing confirmed his involvement. On October 19th, Chel's defense unsuccessfully requested his release pending trial, arguing a lack of evidence besides DNA and that the Civil Guard's hypothesis over the past 18 years suggests that Eva willingly got into a car with someone she knew, engaging in consensual intercourse before her tragic death. Therefore, they believed that there was no sense in charging Chel with sexual assault. Due to the idea of Blanco willingly accepting a ride from the Moroccan, given her friend's assurance that she would never get into a car with a stranger, also made them believe he had no involvement. Chel's lawyer argued that Blanco would never willingly associate with the Moroccan due to alleged neo-Nazi sympathies evidenced in her diaries, linking her to the investigation's early focus on the neo-Nazi group, Bases Autonomous. Chel's first wife sparked another conspiracy theory during an interview with TVE's La Mañana, suggesting the involvement of several people known to the Chel family and hinting at those responsible for the murder. She claimed that Chel returned home between 10 o'clock and 11 p.m. that night, citing her pregnancy as the reason he wouldn't stay out late. According to her, he mentioned being mugged by some boys but didn't report it due to fear. In January 2016, prison psychiatric support lifted the anti-suicide measures from Chel, who claimed he was forced to pleasure himself on Blanco, denying any penetration, but was unable to explain how his bodily fluid was found in her genital area. On January 29, 2016, Chel was discovered dead in his cell, having taken his own life by hanging himself with his shoelaces. The prosecution was officially concluded on February 15, 2016. Eva's family, while finding some closure in knowing who had murdered their daughter, felt disappointed that he did not face the consequences for his wicked deeds, but believed that justice would hopefully be served in the afterlife. Eva Blanco Puig had dreams of becoming an architect and had a passion for drawing. She was an ardent fan of Bon Jovi and also African music. Her sensitivity and sincerity created strong bonds with her friends, and her strong laughter became a defining trait of her personality. She was a responsible and caring older sister, always setting a positive example to her younger sisters. The story of Eva Blanco echoes through time, a story of loss, pain, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As we remember her, we also remember the strength of a community united, seeking answers and closure for the young girl whose life was taken too soon.